All right, well, welcome brothers and guests. My name is Billy Madeline. I'm the Grand President of Sigma Phi Epsilon, and we're excited that you're able to join us this afternoon. We are in St. Louis, Missouri. Our meeting started this morning at 9 a.m. and we've been busy discussing for most of the morning a potential forthcoming campaign for Sigma Phi Epsilon. We also were very fortunate to have a visit by former Grand President and beloved brother John Hartman, who was able to come in and join us for lunch with District Governor Mike Dugan. So that was invigorating, and we of course hugged him and loved on him for all of you as well. This afternoon you're joining for our committee reports. The committees are shepherded by our Grand Secretary Victor Wilson. Our committees have been very busy at work, working on some strategic priorities for the fraternity over the last few months, and some of those groups are in front of others in terms of their work product, given the amount of the nature of the ask that we've made to each of these groups. They are going to be presenting today in a particular order, but of course there's no sense that there's any less value to the ones at the end versus the ones at the beginning there, and so we will be looking forward to hearing these committee reports with you. We have not heard them yet, and I believe that the written committee reports are also available where, Victor?
They will be posted online after the conclusion of the board meeting.
Okay, so there'll be so this is listening, and then we'll have the written reports posted after the meeting. So the presentation should largely follow those. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Grand Secretary Victor Wilson, who's going to take us on a journey through committee land. Victor.
All right, thank you, Billy. I just wanted to, and most of you have heard me say this too, but also I want to start off by thanking the committees for their work. And I think these volunteers have met regularly to fulfill their charge. But I also want to take some time to thank the committee chairman and who've invested even more time ensuring that the meetings have an agenda, facilitating discussions, sending follow-up information, and preparing quality reports for the board. I think as you all have seen and will probably agree that committees are critical to bringing our strategic plan to life. And some of you may have heard me mention this before, and I don't know that you have actually read, but I remember the book Built to Last, which is came out several years ago. But I think if you've seen that book, then one of the things they talk about in Built to Last, and one of the things that they mentioned is the whole idea of BHAGs. And BHAGs are big, hairy, audacious goals. And I think our committees are giving us a roadmap with BHAGs that achieve the objectives of our plan, which I think is incredibly important. I think the key word there for me is audacious. And these are goals. And so I think as you think about BHAGs, I think that's where we're supposed to be. I've heard from many of you and many calls from other folks that will talk about the committees and talk about the committees in terms of their work and saying, you know, they're really coming up with a lot. But I have to say that I think that we have to remember that they're doing what we asked them to do. We asked them to create BHAGs. We asked them to be bold and to be audacious. And I think that's okay. I think in terms of what they're doing is what we asked them. I think that's okay. But even more important, I think, to remember is that their roadmap is long-term, and we can't do all the things in the roadmap in 1 year. The budget won't allow for it. And I'm sure that we know this, and we should, and the staff will actually ultimately be responsible for executing these recommendations in collaboration with each of these committees. So I think that's important to remember. But it's important too that I think we acknowledge openly that a big part of this process of creating BHAGs is accepting that we cannot and that we will not, and we might not even be able to do everything right now. And so a goal can be for now, or it can be for down the road. And so, in other words, I think there's a significant difference between a mandate and a roadmap. And I think as we have conversations, we probably have to think about what we're hearing from these committees in terms of, is it a mandate for now, or if it's a roadmap for the future? Others will create mandates for days to come. And so some of these committees may be able to, they're creating a roadmap. And that's a discussion I think that we're going to have. From my view, I think we need to increase our level of trust of our plan and the committee processes we put in place. And as a national board, I think we all would agree that we've had some amazing discussions about a lot of important topics. And I think these interactions have created some critical questions. But I think we need to move now to allow the plan to answer some of those questions while bringing that plan to fruition. For example, we've asked the vital question, will we exist in 15 years? I think that's a great question. But if we move forward to the work of the committees and execute our plan, that plan itself will make sure and ensure that if we do it right, that we will be here for 15 years from now and in decades to follow that. So let me share an example, because y'all know I love analogies and I love examples. I have this car. As you all know, I will admit openly that I'm a little bougie. I like nice things. I'm not high maintenance, but I am bougie. There's a difference. And so I had this car and I bought the car, but one of the things on the car is really neat. It's this BMW, but it has a button that you push for automatic parking. So you can parallel park. Every time I go to use this, I have never used it because I get in, I let go, and I can feel the car moving, and I can't let the car take control. It just starts moving without me. And it just kind of terrifies me. So one day I'm going to actually be able to do that. And as I think about that, though, I think about what, in some ways, that's what we're doing with our strategic plan. I think we need to take our hands off the wheel, let go of the brake, and let this plan drive us to where we're supposed to be going. And it will move us forward because I think we've done it in the right way. And I think we've got the right things in it, and it's going to benefit us. So if we take our hands off the wheel and let this plan move us forward and let it do the driving, as we should do with our plan, I think we'll see a lot of success. So as you hear from each of these committee chairs this afternoon or their representatives, we'll need to challenge ourselves to think long-term. We'll likely need to make difficult decisions about what we do next year and what we do in future years. But we have, and I would say appropriately so, we've entrusted our coming days of this fraternity in the hands of the committee. And that's huge, but I also think that that's okay. I think that's not a big problem. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And you will see that the reports and the work of the committee should remind us that SigEp has a very solid and bright future. That's one thing I hope that we will remember. We're continuing to challenge ourselves and to provide a better and a more valuable experience that acknowledges the trends in higher education. And I think I can say that. I think Regina would probably agree with me that we're acknowledging the trends that are happening with our undergraduate brothers in that particular place where they are. And as we see that, I think that's more important. And so we also need to remember that we owe our undergraduates all of this as we continue to focus in those areas, and we owe them that and then some. So is all of this a little scary? I would probably say, as a student say to me, hell to the yeah. It is. But I also believe that anytime that you create something that has a sustained and significant change, there's always going to be a little fear. So we should be very proud of this process. I'm biased, obviously, because I've been working on it, and I think many of you have been involved in it as well. But I think we should be very proud of this process because of the way that it's worked, where it's coming from, and the work that they're going to be saying that we need to do in the future. For those of the volunteers and chapter leaders who are with us today and watching on Zoom, if you take an interest in the work you hear described today, whether that means you have an expertise that could assist, or on a committee or your chapter that would like to be a pilot of something that's mentioned, you have a question for the committee chair, don't hesitate to reach out to me and we'll get you looped in. My address is grand.secretary at sigep.net. And additionally, you will find a list of committees and the chairman of each committees and their contact info on our website. And we'll drop that link into the chat for you as we discussed this afternoon. Of course, if you have questions throughout the Zoom, we'll do our best to answer those as time allows. You can put them in the webinar Q&A, but as you know, we have an ambitious schedule, so we'll do our best to get to all the answers to those questions. So are there any questions that any of us have as we do this work, or anything that I've said, or ideas or thoughts as we do this work before we move forward?
Before we get started, Victor, there has been a question asked about the mental health committee and why the mental health committee's report isn't part of our body of work today, so that everyone is aware, because of potential budget implications. We asked the mental health committee to be prepared to, and in fact, they did come and report to the board at our retreat last month. And so we have received the report from the mental health committee. It's a substantial piece of work, and we're going to have to be dealing with a lot of that tomorrow as part of our budgeting process. Tomorrow is where our board hopes to adopt a budget for fiscal 23. So rest assured that committee has been busy at work. They have put a proposal forward. We've received it. That written proposal will be available online in the very near future. There are a few things that that we as an organization are dealing with before we post it, but you should be able to see it in the near future, and we hope you find it as compelling as we did. Victor, anything else?
So any questions? I think we've got some time before our first committee at 2:00. So any thoughts at 2:00 Central Time?
No.
So we've got a little bit of time, and obviously if he comes early.
He's early. He's here.
Oh, okay.
I move we start early
Okay.
because these last time we
did good.
yeah,
Okay.
they
So any questions before? I think the first we've got is, we're ready to go. We've got Tragos Quest for Greece, but any questions before since Brad, I think, is already here, or the other Brad is already here. All right.
Hi, Brad.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Brad.
Happy Friday.
And to you.
Yes. All right. This is my screen showing.
We can see it.
It is.
Well, happy Friday. Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update to you and all of those tuning in on the work of the Quest to Greece Committee. It's very timely. Our scholars and mentors are leaving next week. So just as follow up from our December conversation, a few updates that I want to give all of you. We're going to revisit our just level set on the committee, its composition and its purpose. I want to give you some insight about what's going to be happening next week and the week and a half that follow, and then an update on some of our subcommittee efforts that have happened since December. Level setting for anyone who was not a part of the December, our charge is to ensure that this program continues to be a life-changing event for the mentors, for the scholars, and that takes many forms, and it takes forms in reviewing of the schedule, making sure logistics, working with staff to make sure logistics and schedule are meaningful, that we're listening to scholar feedback and we're adjusting the sites we visit, the places where we invest our time in terms of being in Greece. We also look at the alumni of the program. We see an obligation to make sure that we keep our alumni of the Quest engaged in what we're doing and updating them on with where the program is going, who's going, and engaging them any opportunity that we can. And also the important part of selecting the mentors that actually go, the 5 volunteers that quite frankly are the ones on the ground running the Quest for the scholars. And so with that charge, you can see our membership. Some of the individuals are members of your board, and then our 5 subcommittees that make up the work that we do. From there, with that level set, it's exciting time and nerve-wracking time at the same time, because next Thursday, our scholars will assemble in Chicago, which is pretty common if you're not familiar with the program. They'll assemble and for the first time actually meet each other. They do a series of team buildings, level setting. They do some basics on Greek mythology. They've all been sent some read-aheads that they will be discussing. They and their mentors, and then a professor will be joining them as well. The professor, as I'll discuss in a second, serves an important role of setting the foundation of each day with more of an academic spin of each quest that they go on each day while in Greece. And so with that, there's three major components. If you haven't been on the quest to Greece or you're not familiar with it, I just wanted to break it down for everyone that there are three components, I would say, to the trip. First, there's the philosophy discussion. As I mentioned, we have a professor that will be going with our scholars and mentors that is in fact, and Brad Nardstead and others can speak to this, Dave Calderon, as he chairs the subcommittee, literally have written a book about it. And so they provide some pre-reads as well as lead facilitated academic discussions each morning. And basically it introduces the men to philosophy, to Greek mythology, to Greek history, to bring to life what they're about to see during the course of that day. And so as parts of the Odyssey are read and discussed, teachings of Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle are also included there. Then you move to the actual day. You start your day with some breakfast and discussions with other scholars and the professor, and then you move into the activities of the day. Those take many forms. You're going to museums, you're going to archaeological digs, you're touring small towns as you travel around mainland Greece, starting in Athens and working your way around some of the towns that I have listed. Most probably memorable is Olympia, where you actually go and see where some of the first competitions were held. And then being a former mentor myself, some of the most powerful days are the days when you just walk as a group around the cities and you interact with the locals and you see what it's like in another country to actually embed yourself into the day-to-day life. And then the last transformational part of the quest is the nighttime discussions, as we call them, led by our mentors. We work under this theme of know thyself. And this is one of the aspects of the trip, other than just being in another country, that I think truly differentiates and where the scholars and mentor find that life-changing, eye-opening epiphany moments where you're talking about real things. You're talking about masculinity, you're talking about vulnerability, real application. It's not a space very different from other leadership programs at SigEp where you're talking about what can you bring back to your chapter. As it says, it's about know thyself. And so you spend anywhere from an hour and a half to, Calderon, Narstad, 4 or 5 hours sitting there, just truly getting to know each other. You wake up and you're still there, but it's one of those where it's those night conversations where you've gone through this day of seeing and hearing things that you've never experienced in your life. And then you sit down with your brothers that you just met them a few days ago, and you actually have life conversations about yourselves and the journeys you've been on and the challenges that scare you. And that's something that rounds out each day, and why when you see in feedback, you hear stories of scholars and mentors, they say it truly is a life-changing experience when they take you out of your day-to-day and put you in an environment you don't know with people you don't really know, and you have conversations and experiences like this. So I'll pause there. If there's questions, or if any of you on the board who have gone want to add any other color to share what this experience really is, so that we can kind of all go forward on the same page.
Brad, can you share with us a little bit about how the subcommittees are working with your committee? Any work product, anything that's coming out of your group that is worth this board knowing about?
Billy, I appreciate that outstanding segue that you have now provided. So updating you on the subcommittee work, as I mentioned, 5 primary subcommittees comprise our overall committee. I'll start at the top, and this is Calderon, I'll pick on you. Dave has done an amazing job at working with Professor Klein, again, the individual who wrote the book, or was one of the contributors to the books that we use. And so a complete audit of the curriculum, and making sure that the professor and the scholars are ready for the trip next week. In the engagement and historical preservation subcommittee, it's really about how best do we begin to more actively and proactively engage our alumni. And so we've had a series of conversations about how do we do this? What do people actually care about? Part of that committee is a couple months ago, we did a call for volunteers to be members of these subcommittees, and the group is now reviewing those responses. And in the next few weeks, we'll be going out to all those who raise their hand to assign them to one of these subcommittees. In the fundraising realm, we are really taking a conscious and intentional approach that this isn't about asking for money at this point. This is about re-engaging our alumni and making sure that they are back into this circle to know what's going on with the quest. So that's where you're going to see a lot of our work in the fundraising subcommittee. And you see on here as well is making sure that we're in alignment with the rest of the foundation and the national staff to make sure that any fundraising efforts, we're in coordination, at least communication with who is involved and what are we asking for from whom. In the mentor cultivation and training subcommittee, Greg and Brad chair that subcommittee. They did an amazing job at recruiting 5 outstanding volunteers. And they didn't just stop there, which is something I'm very proud of. The work that they have done, which is they took what was this rough mentor guide, they kind of cleaned it up, and then they did a training session, which has taken many forms, but I felt this year they really elevated it to a new level. A 90-minute session with sharing best practices, walking in a very detailed manner through the agenda, giving tips and tricks along the way, because when you go to Greece, they're pretty much running the show. And so I felt we're really setting our scholars up for success and our mentors by preparing them and sharing a lot of our lessons learned. And last but certainly not least, our scholar recruitment and selection committee, now that they hit kind of their spike, which was the selection process, they took a short kind of pause, and Grant and his committee are also looking at what do we need to do for the next cycle. So was the application give us the right information to select scholars? How was the experience for the scholars in applying for the quest? And so we're doing that kind of evaluation right now to prepare for the 2023 cycle. So any questions about subcommittee work?
I guess I'm going to ask a question just in terms of tying it into our broader campaign conversation. Is there anything that's happening vis-a-vis Tragos Quest to Greece on the fundraising side that has been shared with staff specifically toward how we will or will we raise money as a part of this campaign for the quest?
Brad, you want me to take that? Sure. So as Brad pointed out, one of the things that we want to be able to do first is re-engage our past scholars. We've gone on now 20 trips, and there are a lot of our scholars who are no longer engaged in the fraternity. This was likely a very powerful moment for all of them, regardless of when they went. We want to first find a way to re-engage them in the fraternity and hopefully re-engage them in some of the things we're doing with the quest. From there, we want to be able to ensure the long-term financial stability of the program, potential growth of the program, once these committees have ironed out some of the work and opportunities to do that. So there's not necessarily any specific plan right now to say we're going to raise X amount of money from these number of alumni to do these things. We need to re-engage some very talented alumni who are no longer connected with the fraternity today. And from there, we can do some amazing things with that talent.
Are there any broad themes that are emerging as to why we are losing these scholars and they're becoming disengaged? I mean, is that just,
I think it's the same
we don't
problem
do
we
a
have.
good job, or is it
It's the same problem we have with Ruck and the same problem we have with Carlson, is that we don't do a good job of retaining our young alumni. And
so nothing we've done, it's what we haven't done.
right, that's correct.
Okay, well then it shouldn't be too hard to get them back.
I would say something exciting to see. So this year in Founders Day of Giving, we did a challenge for our past Quest scholars, where past mentor Scott Carr challenged them, and almost a third of the scholars for the last 20 years contributed, were a part of that. They were asked by an undergraduate to join and give, and almost a third of them did. And that was sort of unprecedented. I think something that will help build that annual affinity. And I know we're gonna be sending them a video from Greece next week saying, thank you to everyone who stepped up. We're here now. And I think things like that and what Brad and his group are working on will only help build that affinity over time.
How does that compare with other potential affinity groups like, say, Ruck Scholars or
Yeah.
something? of
I'd
that
say
nature?
what we're doing right now with Brad and the committee is a test run for what we can do with Ruck. And that's the way we're treating it, that this is a good opportunity to test and learn and possibly apply it to other programs that have a strong affinity group.
Other questions or concerns? Brad, was that the end of your report?
That is the end of my report.
Okay, so again, any questions or concerns, feedback for Brad and his committee? I look forward to joining you next week.
We do have one
Oh, he's not gonna be-
from the audience.
Oh,
It was, Brad, how does SigEp differentiate the role of a Tragos Quest to Greece mentor as opposed to potential other volunteers like a coach for career coaching or a mentor for a chapter?
Brad, can you walk through the mentor recruitment process,
Sure.
mentor selection process?
Yeah, of course. The role of mentor is one that it's multifaceted. I mean, you are leading a trip in another country with anywhere from 15 to 18 undergraduate men. You are expected to actively participate in all aspects of the program, including the pre-reads and the academic discussion, the site visits, museums, walking around Greece, walking around the small towns, and then to facilitate the nightly discussions, which takes many different forms and requires quite a dynamic skill set. And so I would say we are very mindful of the various things that we expect and ask of our mentors. And so we first, a lot of it's on recommendation. A lot of it's on who do undergraduates, who are they drawn to, who do they respond to, who have we worked with, meaning committee, has the staff worked with, who have we seen facilitate in other leadership programs. And so right now it's based on recommendations. And then we do a series of conversations with those who have worked with them, sometimes with those individuals directly. And from there, we make a down select. The other important element is there is a financial obligation to being a mentor. And so we recognize that is sometimes a barrier, and we are working on trying to find ways to reduce that barrier. But in current state, it is a reality. And so right now, the selection process, Brian, to your question is about referral and us doing our homework and research to make sure we find the right fit. Because it's also, we have to think of it not on an individual basis, but a team. Because when they go over there, those 5 mentors are a team that are leading this week and a half long trip. And so it's making sure that we have a diverse, but well coherent and a group that meshes well together, that will work as a unifying group to lead this entire experience.
And as one of the people who's responsible for identifying and recruiting the mentors.
Spread our set, everyone.
Yeah, sorry. Just to add to what Brad said, Brian, one of the other things that we're looking at is diversity in terms of life experience, career experience, age, right? We don't want to send, 4 mentors or 5 mentors who are in their 60s with a group of 18 or 19 or 20, 20 or 21-year-olds. Some of it, there's a list, we have a list, a database of potential mentors. One of the things that we've tried to do, sometimes we will ask someone to go as a mentor who we believe would be a good fit. And at that particular time, it's not an option for them. Financially, they can't swing it. They just had a new baby, so they can't take the time off. They can't get time off of work. we will sometimes go back to those people in a couple of years and ask again if we think that there's someone that fits, what Brad was talking about. So it's not just, putting names in a hat and picking them out. There is a lot of, I think, time spent identifying people that we think would contribute individually, contribute group-wise, be able to handle what the trip requires, the financial component, and is it someone that we think may have been approached before who would be a good mentor and wasn't able to do it at that time, and then we will circle back around with that.
Thanks for adding that color.
Yep.
Any other questions, Heather, that are, okay?
The board, anybody else in the board have questions?
No, I just want to point out Brad has done an awesome job corralling what is an interesting group of personalities, not only on the steering committee, but the selection committee and all of that. And he has just been a phenomenal chairman. So I want to thank you, Brad, for all the time and all the effort and stuff you put into it.
Yeah, great job, Brad.
Thank you, Dave. Checks in the mail. Appreciate that.
You can collect it at Rock next week, right?
Add a zero to it, buddy.
Will do. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Brad. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Victor. Appreciate your time, everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Okay, next we have Darren Trebetsky with the Growth Committee.
Afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Darren.
How are you? For those I haven't met, Darren Trebetsky, I'm proud to represent the recruitment committee pinch hitting for Eric Lauterbach. And likewise, any compliments to the committee, I'll take. Any negatives, I'll be sure to take back to Lauterbach. So, and to be super clear, Victor, I am also super bougie. So I'm excited that I get to spend some time with some like-minded folks. This is fantastic.
There you go.
So let me share screen, and excited to take you through the great work that the team has been collectively with headquarters staff and the volunteers working on. So let me share screen, make sure everybody can see. Larger. Perfect. Welcome to SigEp. This is what the Brothers of Tomorrow experience with the first time and their first exposure to our brand. And these are examples of what he will see before we ever step foot on campus. So when you think about expansion and what we've tested so far in expansion, in the fall, we really began to focus on what that preheat will look like to warm up a campus to SigEp. This is the experience that we want our new brothers to have. So what did we do? So primarily we launched social media presence for our startup to build the SigEp brand, relationships on campus, and driving a lot of leads. There was daily content led to the Greater Balance Band Scholarship applications and referrals, as well as more recognition on campus. And most importantly, us driving the storytelling. So this had success in driving traction, driving leads, paired with the terrific on-the-ground staff that does this work diligently every time we have a new expansion. In expansion, also, the committee looked into just some of the criteria for selecting those startup sites, focusing on different types of aspects like enrollment trends, ability to generate lists of unaffiliated freshmen, true partnerships with campus, alumni engagement, et cetera. So the committee is still actively involved with conversations like that. But what you see on the screen was really generated from some of the work we started with this concept of preheat. And I think most of you have seen this work in this slide. Ideally, you would like to start out 18 months. We haven't been able to hit that milestone yet, as this is a new process for us as we test, measure, and learn. But ideally, if you're 18 months out, you bring together that volunteer recruitment, that alumni engagement, communication and marketing, and partnerships on campus to both build that infrastructure for the chapter success, as well as just driving leads for recruitment. This is about recruitment. I think a really positive step, just last week, the growth and marketing staff members visited 2 of our fall expansions, so Texas A&M and Boise State. They looked at those opportunities to foster stronger marketing and brand awareness. So that's 4 months out. So a lot of the activities you'll see, the 3 to 6 months out, we're starting to be able to have the opportunity to test, again, measure and implement. Campus-focused digital brand awareness campaign, host a major campus event, engaging different clubs and major and club fairs and campus events. The student and transfer orientation, looking at some of those high-performing students, the digital market BMS application, a lot of these types of opportunities, getting them out there ahead of time. So that helps early lead generation so that we can start to drive more success in building the chapter. So that's exciting. We're testing, we're measuring, we're learning, and we're continuing to implement. So that's what we'll continue to do based on what we've started so far. I think you'll see from us in the future, you'll see we'll implement marketing, recruitment, engagement strategies that will expand upon this and going deeper, because I think the more we can learn, the more we can apply on a broad base. Specific to expansion, I think it's an important note. Across the fraternity landscape, not that I like to use that as our competitive set. I think it's much broader than that when you look at the potential new members that we can drive, but it is a good data point. They're struggling. Their overall expansion numbers are down across the board. Groups that were once really successful in starting with large groups aren't seeing it. And I think there's a really compelling consumer insight that can be gathered from this. Students are requiring definitely more time, more touch points to make their decisions. So it's critical that we continue to implement new strategies like the preheat, designed to interact with them more. So the process has really changed, and it's definitely more high touch. We need to lead through that. And I think emphasizing these earlier engagement on the campuses with this preheat approach can really start to drive just better success and outperform a lot of the competition. Okay. When it comes to overall recruitment, I think for us, this is a slide that is very powerful and really drives our committee, right? This idea that 1 out of 11, and is that something that is acceptable to us, or that we feel we really can impact and expand upon? So since we last met and thinking about overall recruitment, so leaving from expansion to how we can drive overall recruitment, one of the big steps we were taking was conducting an RFP to get and selecting a marketing partner to work with us against really 3 big deliverables for them to help us market the fraternity, our product, and today's college students and the future generation of potential SigEps, their parents, and other stakeholders. So when making this decision, we really looked at a marketing agency that's capable of helping us develop a branded recruitment campaign, right? That solidifies our core message as that rally cry for our members, as well as a targeted and compelling pitch for our potential members. This will be the basis for which we build a lot of the marketing materials and refine educational resources that we can deliver to our chapters that they can utilize and make their own. So giving them some more turnkey type of approaches to really get after it. So we selected, this is probably new, hopefully not new to the committee, but just more of an update. Basement was that agency that we selected. So Basement is based out of Indianapolis. They have a super strong background. As you can see below, some of the different organizations they've worked with, from collegiate admissions to sports to digital marketing to a lot of the branding work. I think it's really helps us to look at a broader competitive set, which I think is super important for growth, as well as firmly believe that sometimes you need non-SigEps to help you get non-SigEps. So I think that they'll be super helpful with identifying that. So the big 3 takeaways haven't changed from last time that we shared this. Their Basement's going to help us with a compelling core message, that mantra that's really going to resonate across not just that 1, but the other 10 out of the 11 that we're trying to capture. They'll help us develop that branded recruitment campaign, dynamic content that not only helps us in expansion, but helps us in recruitment for all of our chapters. And that market research. There's a lot of things that definitely when you gather insights, you want to go from thinking to knowing, and having that market research can really help validate our approaches, help us recalibrate some of our approaches, but definitely set us on the right path. Because I think the important thing when you look at what Basement's going to help us do, it's not changing who we are, right? It's better communicating who we are. And I think that's an important distinction for us moving forward to start to tap into that 91% of students that aren't seeing value in what we have to offer when we know that we clearly do. Over the last month, Basement's interviewed a lot of SigEp undergrads, recruitment-focused volunteers, high school students, parents, guidance counselors, and more, conducting that market research. And they'll begin that creative work this month and starting to build out fulfilling the 3 points up top. For us, we'll begin testing those marketing messages and strategies this fall. So really impacting the next recruitment cycle to test, to measure, to learn, and to continue to evaluate. So the marketing materials that the chapters can customize and make their own. I think that's an important part to this. Strategies to help our chapters better to get after all 11 of the 11 that we feel like should see value in what we bring as SigEp. So basement's a big deal. Appreciate everything that the board and the staff have done to empower our committee to really start to drive this overall messaging, which is really going to help us expand our scope and our reach. So thank you. This hopefully isn't new information to the board. I know Eric supplied a lot of pre-read content, but I think for us, and I can stop sharing now. This is the big message that Eric wanted to convey, and I think the committee is, we're definitely on a longer term journey with this, right? Recruitment is definitely, it's not a moment, it's not a conclave, it's not a marketing moment. It's continuous. So as we learn and grow and evaluate the right methods to get after, we're going to help all chapters, which I think is our overall goal in growing us and taking us in the future. We're going to try some things that are going to work, and we're going to try some things that might not. And I think for us, that's okay. We should all be comfortable with that. I love talking about the big, hairy, audacious goals. I didn't hear much when you said we might not fund all those. Like that kind of tuned out. I didn't hear that. But I really love that idea of taking big swings, because the marketplace has changed for us as a fraternity, as what interests the college student of today. We have to be able to connect to him, what's important to him. We feel profoundly that we have what they want. We have to find a way to reach them in a new, compelling way. So that way we ensure the future of the brand isn't just myself and everyone on this call, but it's the people we haven't recruited yet. So bear with us. We think we're really going to continue to deliver some tremendous results, but this was just a small snapshot of what's in process. And thanks to Heather and all the team for really, everyone, all of you, for helping to push this work forward.
Any questions? Most important, I'm supposed to tell y'all that there's a cheese plate out there or something if you need cheese. But anyway, any questions or comments?
Darren, you had mentioned the kind of continuous rollout of the work with the basement. If I'm a chapter leader, when should I feel some impact from this work? Can we try and maybe talk a little bit about when we would be rolling some things out, how long this would take before I start feeling an impact?
Yes,
Or being asked to do something?
You teed me up well. So I think it's a great question. And our goal obviously is to impact the next recruitment cycle. The depth and level, I think, will grow over time. That's the rolling part of it. So as we start to get some of the marketing tools and resources that we have, we want to deploy them out to the pilot chapters as soon as we can. So that's where we want more chapters to feel the presence of this, but it is something that is a long-term type of approach that we're going to take in messaging that hopefully chapters will feel years and years to come. But this next recruitment cycle is our focus once we get some of the work back from the basement.
Is part of the work that you're engaged with and basement is doing on our behalf, helping to also create capacity within the chapters to do their own collateral building around marketing? Okay, excellent.
And Heather's there too. She's definitely going to overrule me on a lot of this, which is great. She'll tell me when I said too much or too little, but that's 100% the intent.
To create things that are customizable so that they'll work like Mizzou will have them and they'll work for Mizzou and they'll feel like Mizzou, but with our branded message and our rally cry in a way that they want to and are excited to embrace. And really also teaching them how to run real digital campaigns. I mean, we're still recruiting in some ways like it's 1990 and waiting for guys to show up at the front door and rush. Many fraternities are. So we're looking at how do we help Greg's brothers at Mizzou or at LSU or at Dartmouth, like learn how to run real digital marketing campaigns, how to target market, all of those things.
I think that's really exciting stuff. And Darren, we talked about it during a call. I mean, we're able to actually train a vice president of recruitment or a vice president of communications on how to run a sales or marketing campaign that in a way that's going to be applicable to what they do after college. It's just really great professional development for them while they're obviously building their chapter and recruiting more talented guys and leaving a legacy that they want to leave as officers.
Just to go a little further on that, Darren, I don't know if you could expand a little bit on, or Heather or anybody, on what we're doing to train the whole chapter as recruiters rather than just the vice president of recruitment or the recruitment committee, how we're trying to get that same, not to the same extent, but at least the same concept out to chapters holistically.
Can we go first, Heather?
Yeah, go for it.
I love to overcommit you, so let me go first. So I think an important part of the last few years, last fall recruitment cycles, they were able to engage alumni into being able to present to those VPs of recruitment and talk to them and engage with them more. And clearly some of the feedback was like, how do we get this further directly from you? So that was perfect. So the plan has been to expand the audience for that. I think that's just where you're giving access and creating spaces for like minds to talk. It's not just to be presented to, it's to give them space to be able to brainstorm together. A lot of that great sharing that we know happens at Carlson Leadership Academy now can happen just as easily on a Zoom call with other VPs of recruitment, other chapter members across the country. So that would be the intent as we move forward into the fall, to just create those recruitment spaces for that idea sharing and also to help inspire them to hit their targets.
And then just to push a little bit further, to what extent is that training going to continue to be provided by staff? Because I think right now that's what a lot of the RD time and a lot of staff time is devoted to recruitment training. Is there more alumni that are coming into play, more volunteer training that we're trying to do, where it's not just we take it off staff a little bit and put it on someone else? Is it something that we might consider outsourcing at some point, like we've done with the basement a little bit? Or is there a change there?
The summer development program and the training that we provide our services team will have to be elevated and changed significantly. So there will be a lot of staff driven components to this, and we're going to have to train up our staff to deliver good services. I think the other thing is it's going to challenge us to do the same thing with volunteers. So we're going to have on the grounds, just side-by-side mentorship for this time of stuff's due. And I think it's going to challenge us to recruit some volunteers who have expertise in this space and would be excited to work side by side with an undergraduate to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Heather's team is going to be deeply involved in this to make sure that the resources continue to stay fresh and that we learn and adjust as we apply everything that we're getting from the basement and evolve accordingly. So there's a lot of moving parts to all make sure we can support this holistically.
I think it's a great point, B-Dub. I think a lot of times in this current environment and how from working and how we all interact with each other, I found it easier to volunteer in the last few years than ever before. And I think we have to engage alumni in those opportunities as well, that are experts. They can do it from anywhere in the country to impact a chapter on the other side of the country. So utilizing the new tools that we have that people are very comfortable with and engaging more alumni that way, I think we'll be able to attract a lot more folks like myself that would be interested in doing more and more of that.
And I just want to validate the notion of creating shared space for students and chapters to share their best practices. I think that's where a lot of learning happens, and certainly not every chapter is going to utilize the same set of strategies, but there's just so much value in the students sharing what's worked for them. And I think particularly as we move into sort of this endemic phase of COVID and helping students reorient to what it means to engage, particularly in in-person recruitment activities. It's extremely important that we create space for them to share how they're doing that And because there's a lot of relearning that is going to have to take place for the students to be successful at that.
Yeah, appreciate your comments. Those are it's helpful to hear that.
We have a couple from the folks watching. Stephen Jorgen asked, are the growth tactics you talked about, Darren, adaptable? I think he was talking mostly about the startup or expansion ones. Are those adaptable to existing chapters struggling with manpower?
Yeah, I would hope that through the test, learn, and test, measure, and learn process, 100%, that we're going to find some that really do apply much broader, right? I think that's kind of the point. I think so. There's some things about a new startup that's unique, that has some different requirements, but it's not that different. So I think everything that we're trying, we want to see if it is applicable and much broader to every chapter, especially chapters that could use additional help and support. So yes.
If you think about how that came about, right? The committee started with, we want the best end result for a new startup. So what's the template look like? And let's back that up. I don't know why you couldn't say that's transferable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then another one said, will SigEp own the interview materials and market research from the basement's work? Other committees may be able to benefit from better understanding our consumers.
Oh, 1,000%. You never get better as an organization by hiding information. You have to share, you have to be transparent. What I might find in an insight with specifically to my scope on recruitment might be completely different to another committee might see. Well, absolutely. The insights are for everyone in the organization to benefit from.
Other questions for growth committee?
So Darren, I want to reemphasize something about the sort of the 8 ball we're behind. 1 in 11 young men say that they're likely to join a fraternity. Do we know how many actually join a fraternity?
Yes. So 1 in 11 students who are incoming freshmen say they're likely to, which is 9%.
Right.
Only 8% of men actually join fraternities.
So I knew the answer. And so no, but I think it's really important for folks to understand that we, fraternity globally, managed to actually sell less product than there's demand for. We have 9%, which is already unacceptable, coming in saying, I want to be in a fraternity. And somewhere along the way, we managed to lose 1% of them. Right. So we know that in SigEp's case in particular, we actually pick up a lot of people who join SigEp who are not part of that 1 in 11. They're the non-joiners, right? So where in the hell does everybody else go, right? So I think there's a terrific opportunity here, just in some real low-hanging fruit. If we just captured more than our fair share of this 1 in 11 that magically disappears between high school and college, we would be setting world records. So there is as low as the demand is in America for college fraternities as expressed by incoming freshmen, there is an opportunity there for us to capture a disproportionate share of that market simply by getting our act together and knowing how to sell what we do. So thank you for the work of the committee, because you're going to obviously help us figure that out. It's something we've struggled with, and you know this, Darren, you've been around for a while. We've struggled as an organization for a long time to how to talk about, sell, memorialize, symbolize who we are. And we got a lot of stuff, and it's all over the place. And bless our chapter's hearts, they are also all over the place. Everybody's trying to constantly recreate the wheel. And so I think the work that your committee is doing has the potential to be very durable. And I think not just will it work, but I think it could last for a really long time. So I'm excited to see what's going to come from it. Thank you.
No, thank you for the encouragement. I appreciate that, because I know that when you look at the other 91%, I think a lot of this work we're putting the basement focused on this agency is to understand what's important to the 91%? Why? What other organizations are they joining and why? What's important to them? And I think we're going to find a lot of similarities to what we already have to offer. We believe that profoundly, that we are the solution for what a lot of undergraduates are looking for. We have to find a better way to connect with them and relate to them, because they will love their experience they have with our fraternity. We just have to reach them in a new way. So that's what we're focused on doing, making sure that we have long lasting beyond even the, will we be here 15 years? I want us to be beyond that. I would love for us to be the leading leadership organization globally, period. Bigger than a fraternity, bigger than anything else, because that's what I believe we have to offer to so many young men that can make a difference in their lives. We just have to make sure they understand that we're the answer.
That's the plate.
And where's the cheese plate? So where's?
I'll keep some for you. Darren.
Thank you, Brother Wilbert. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time very much. Thank you. I'm going to drop off and continue listening, but look forward to giving you our next update.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Okay.
I think we're characteristically ahead of schedule, but
That will last. This one.
Yeah.
Next, we have Wendell Rakowski, who's the chairman of the Volunteer Development Committee.
There we go. Hey, welcome, everybody. It's great to see everybody. My name is Wendell Rakowski, and I just go by Wendell. I decided if Cher can do that and Madonna can do that, so can I. Now, with that said, I'm going to figure out how to share my screen. And here we go.
Wendell, I feel like you need to start with a little Frank Sinatra.
Do not encourage me. You could be sorry. Oh, there we go. So I've been heading up the Volunteer Development Committee since late last year, but we really got our work started in January. To simplify this is really training our volunteers. So when we talk about Volunteer Development Committee, it's really, how are we going to be training our volunteers? I'm going to keep you on schedule. So we have a lot to talk about, but I'm going to keep you on schedule. So please speak up if I go too fast here. But the things I wanted to talk about is, what's our objective? What did we come up with our concept of operations? How's it going to operate? What are the components that we've identified up to date? Talk to you a little bit about a certified SigEp volunteer program, summarize what we've completed to date, what's the next steps, and then what do we need from you? Keep in mind, this is a status update, okay? We're in progress and we're moving, and there is nothing finalized in any dynamic process. So as we go through this, if there are things that need to be tweaked or changed or different directions, we're all on board to do that. So when we got together, the first thing we had to decide is, what are we supposed to be doing? And so we put together an objective, and our objective really was, what are the keys to success? Or excuse me, in addition to our objective, what were our keys to success and what were our key deliverables? We wanted to have a comprehensive program. It needed to support the new SigEp strategic plan. It had to meet our future needs, and it also had to provide an environment that the volunteers will embrace. So it's a balancing act between, let's meet our future needs, and it's got to be a program volunteers say we want to be a participant in. We identified 6 components to success and identified 8 different deliverables. And I'm not going to read the chart to you unless you'd like me to, but we're going to talk about these here. And this really became our roadmap to guide our recommendations. Okay, now that we knew, okay, this is what we were supposed to do, the next thing we wanted to talk about was, what's our concept of operations? How are we going to operate this thing? And it just made common sense to make it part of the Phil Cox Volunteer Institute. And we came up with an objective there also within the Phil Cox Volunteer Institute of, what should this training be? It had to be full life cycle. It had to be able to work with new engaged volunteers, those long-term experienced volunteers, and ensure everybody got the same information regarding history, background, and fundamentals and necessary skills training. As you know, we get volunteers that come from different, if you want to call them, generations, and sometimes they haven't been engaged for a number of years. And we wanted to get everybody up to speed and say, hey, the fraternity that you joined 20 years ago or 30 years ago has done things a little differently now. And here's how we do things differently. We wanted to get everybody on the same page. So you'll see the little abbreviation KV, that stands for key volunteers. And I'm going to talk to you about who are key volunteers, I think in the next chart or a couple of charts up here. But the program design in essence is key volunteers are going to be required to take core training. And we're going to identify what those core training programs are. In addition, they're going to be encouraged, not required, but encouraged, because we want to make it simple in the beginning here, encouraged to select a learning track based on their role. So if I am the president of the AVC, we're going to identify, here's the classes, here's some additional training you should be taking, and encourage you to take that. And then also, there's going to be an option, if you're interested, to pursue what we're calling a certified SigEp volunteer. The key here is to provide a consistent volunteer training delivery system for our volunteers. So there's not 5 different ways to train the volunteers. Here's our way of training volunteers. So here are the 6 main components we came up with. There's going to be required core training, then there'll be electives. There's going to be an optional certification. We need to have some type of volunteer recognition and evaluation. And the evaluation is, the committee felt it was important that we come up with a way to give feedback to the volunteers, because sometimes the volunteers don't get the feedback they need. Also needed to come up with a community networking and support group. How can these volunteers interact with each other during the year? And share stories and share best practices. And then also the last component is, what's the program delivery and how are we going to handle the ongoing operations? So our first, once we got that out of the way, we decided, okay, who's our population? Who are we training? And so we came up with there are 33 key volunteer roles within Sigma Phi Epsilon. And after we identified the 33 key roles, and this came from headquarters, if you're a volunteer within SigEp, you fall into one of these categories. At least you should, or we missed one. The next step was, we need to divide them into their job categories, because each job category has a different training need. So we had AVC operations, and those are the jobs in the AVC operations, chapter development, and chapter development are those roles that are responsible for providing guidance to the whole chapter. Their actions typically impact the whole chapter. Then there's the mentoring, and the mentoring is one-on-one. So these are roles where one person is typically mentoring one other person. Now, a mentor may have 2 or 3 people that they're mentoring, but the key is that it's one-on-one. And then lastly, there's headquarters roles, committee members like myself, district governors, and all the different committees different boards that we have, et cetera. So the folks on the national board, you're a volunteer and are part of the headquarters key volunteer groups. So that helped us to guide us a little bit on who our population was. So then we said, after we did some, what's the right word? We did some churning. Here is a 1-pager of what we're coming up with. And that is, we'll have 8 core training classes. And these are the 8 titles of the programs. We had some ideas what the content should be, but this is what, in essence, what the core training should be. What's our history? What's SigEp today? What's the fraternity world today? What's headquarters and how do they operate? What are some effective volunteer skills? Introduction to mentoring, how to communicate across generations, and partnering with the university. So those were the 8 classes we felt. And as this morphs, as I said, it's very dynamic. We might end up with 6. As we start working through this, maybe some of these can be combined into others, or maybe there's going to be 9. You never know. But this is our guide today. And then we had to stop eventually. We've got 22 elective classes here. There are more. And there are some that are not on here that need to be on here. For example, we know that there is a training program being developed for the AVC treasurers. We know there's a training program coming up for the district governors. We need to integrate that into this also. And then across all of this, as I said, there would be available a SigEp, certified SigEp volunteer. We also decided we needed to come up with a common training course template. Now, this template is very simplistic, and based on feedback we've gotten from headquarters, it's very similar to what the headquarters uses when they put their programs together. But we wanted to provide something to folks who were creating training programs. Here is a common template. So we have we're structuring them similarly, and we have similar styles, if that's the right word. Now, as I said, we did provide we have come up with a suggested template, but my understanding is that there are plans to hire a director of education. If that's not true, please let me know. That person would be the ultimate owner and designer of the template. So we would provide them a recommendation, and then they could mold it to what they believe is the most effective. So again, the key is whether it's our template or an alternative template, we need to have a consistent format so we can drive the quality of the training. Real quickly, here is what we were thinking about regarding a certified SigEp volunteer program. An individual would have to complete their core training, and then they would have to complete 3 electives within 6 months. They also have to participate in a future headquarters learning event. So why we're saying future, it's not, well, I went to Conclave last year. Well, it doesn't count now. You got to go to a future one. So a future headquarters learning event. And you can take the elective training without pursuing certification. It is an option. We're going to have a very simplistic exam at the end of each training class. It's very simplistic. It's not intended to be a stumper. It's not intended to, weed everybody out. It's intended to make sure, did you pay attention in the class? So we would have a very basic exam after each of the classes. Our guide right now is about 5 questions for every 15 minutes of class. So I believe that's what we came up with. And then the certification would be valid for 2 years. We haven't gotten to recertification options yet, how to do that. We just haven't gotten there yet. So the key here is that this does encourage and recognize continued learning. And that really goes to my next chart. Some people have said, hey, why are we thinking about a certified SigEp volunteer program? The key is, first is, it's a recruitment tool for new volunteers. You can tell new volunteers who've said, I haven't been involved in the fraternity for 20 years. Well, hey, we've got a certified SigEp volunteer program as a part of our training activity if you want to get involved in. It reinforces SigEp's focus on volunteer learning. We want you volunteers to continue to be learning. It also provides recognition for those volunteers who want more. There's always those volunteers out there who say, hey, I want more. I want to learn more. I want to take more. And so when that happens, it also encourages others to seek additional training, because the dynamic goes, hey, I took this training. Are you going to take it? So it helps with that. And also, lastly, it does deliver the message, or reinforce the message to the undergraduates, the value of continued learning. So that's why we believe this would be an important component of a volunteer development program. So here's where we are. You see, this was the chart I showed, second or third chart. We've identified our key roles. We've identified our core and target skills training. We've come up with a SigEp volunteer certification program, and we've also completed a common designs. What we have to do yet is identify subject matter experts for our training programs. We've been throwing around some ideas on how to do this. We do not expect to have 30 subject matter experts for every class, for example. So we're trying to come up, how are we going to do this? But one thing I have seen from a volunteer in my training, every year I'll go to the same training class, and it's different every year. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But I think that if we have one person that says, here is what we should be doing regarding entry-level mentoring skills, we can turn to that person and say, hey, is our training hitting on what you believe are the key mentoring skills to have right now? We need to design our recognition and evaluation. We're going to take a look at all the volunteer recognition at the same time, at this time also. We also have to work on our volunteer networking and training support. How are we going to deliver this? And we've already talked about it's going to be a balance of in-person and remote. So people can take it remote and also they can take it in person, and program delivery. So a key note here is that the class content and all exams are going to be designed by some other committee or the headquarters staff. We do not believe, our committee does not believe we are the experts in these areas to develop these classes. And so what we're really doing is developing the framework, the recommended framework. So what do we need from headquarters for success? If we are hiring a director of education, the sooner we can get that individual on board, the better for us, because we need to partner closely with that person. We need some help with coordinating the creation of these classes and the content. And also we could use some expertise or assistance on platform delivery options. Somebody who might have some expertise in how to deliver video programs, for example. And so those are the three things we're looking for. That is everything. This is the committee, and just wanted to share the names, and I want to thank them for all the work that they've done. We've been meeting every other week since January, and as I said, we still have a lot of work to do. What questions can I take?
Questions, Wendell? Anyone? Bueller?
For the sake of just provoking good discussion, Wendell, there's, I mean, one, this is extremely exciting. I think we've all are excited by what we just heard, and it's such a thoughtful and comprehensive approach to volunteer development, and we've needed it for a while. And thank you for organizing this committee and getting this work done. It is a lot. How long are you guys thinking or talking about right now in terms of the amount of time that we'll need to do all of this and get it up and running?
So let me real quickly jump to one other chart to help answer that.
Of course you're ready. Look at
There
this.
you go. There you go, Brian. Ask and you shall
So
receive.
good, Wendell.
So this is what we believe our timeline is, and I can't see part of it because I have to move this here. There. It's great having the video on here, but it's blocking my chart. There we go. So this is what we're thinking is that for the first year, I mean, getting us to 2023 conclave, if we can get some work started on the content, we believe that we can get the core training delivered for next year's CLAs, and also the targeted skills, and also the certification and designation piece. We believe we're going to need next year to finalize, all the recognition and the volunteer community. So, Brian, to answer your question, if we can get some, what's the right word, traction on getting the core training programs designed and developed, we should be ready for CLA this year.
So the director of education is included in the proposed budget for tomorrow. As far as some of the other platform expenses or technology expenses, have you guys done any cost projections around what we would need to invest there?
Not yet. No, we have not gotten to that part yet because we've only been working on the first part of the design of the program. But that is, if I remember right, I think that is, that was on our next to do chart.
Okay.
Right here, right? Items to do here. Determine method of delivery and the platform.
Okay, so you use that to direct costs. Okay, got it.
I have to deliver higher education counterparts have some insight on this platform. So you guys have to be doing this.
My question was, how did we deliver all of our instruction to chapters remotely during COVID?
Zoom.
Zoom.
Was it
Yeah,
one?
Zoom.
Yeah. exactly.
There you
Just
go.
keep doing it.
Yeah.
I don't think you have, I
Or
mean, we
before.
could certainly buy some more
Fancy
extensive
LMS. Yeah.
platform, but it's probably not necessary.
Yeah, that is exciting. That's a lot of stuff, man. Wendell, very impressive.
Thank you. It was the whole committee, and we're just trying to meet the objectives that we came up with. We're thinking, we're not the experts, but we're thinking that, a lot of this can be, design class one. Let's just the easy one, SigEp history, design SigEp history. And then can we record it? I'm just asking out loud. Can we record it on a simple video and make it a YouTube video that's restricted somehow? That might be a simplistic answer, because we love simple, and that's what we're trying to get to. So, but we don't know. We have not researched this a lot yet.
Hey, guys, this is Greg. This is Greg. We have a model, and I don't know that we still do it, but we did chapter counseling onboarding. Gosh, back about 4 or 5 years. It was a series of videos you watched, and then you interact with the mentor after that. That you had to go through before you could actively be a chapter counselor. So we've done this before. Training in 10 that Archie used to do is also another good delivery method for might be a good way to do the electives. So we've done this. I think the platform is not a big hurdle.
I would appreciate if, again, just to reinforce, if somewhere in the next 60 days, if somebody could help us identify an individual that we could work with and ask our questions to, that would be very helpful.
We have several questions from the audience. One was, how would a program like this impact volunteer recruitment? Would they see it as a burden or an option to build confidence?
If it's a burden, it might not be the right volunteer, because we really need our future volunteers to go through our core training. I'm sure everybody who's online has been a volunteer, and you do get various levels of volunteers, and we need to set the expectations and say, here's SigEp of today. And so hopefully it isn't a burden. It's not intended to be an onerous training program. So hopefully it's not a burden.
Heather, I would also go back to Brian Tinslinger's report to us earlier in the week on the call, right? This was a desired outcome by the volunteers that he met with. They wanted this.
I think this is not a perfect comparison, but similar to trying to say is the Balanced Man program a hindrance in recruitment or helping? If the Balanced Man program is a hindrance in undergraduate recruitment, that's not the guy we want to recruit.
Stephen Jurgen said he's very excited to one day share certification badges on my SigEp. So whenever he gets certified, he's ready for this. Bryce Giesler said this is fantastic and really challenging goals, and that some of those training modules could be easily modified for chapter B and P use, like history of my SigEp could really serve dual practices. Let's see. Okay. Sorry. Oh, we had one question earlier that was interesting about volunteering in general. And Brett Harrell said, I have 2 kids who get all my free time right now. So I can no longer volunteer with a chapter, but I attend all calls like this. I want to stay engaged. What does SigEp want most from an alum like that?
Money.
2 kids in there, right? About that.
Right, he answered that
He
question.
did say money could be the answer, and only if you said it. I don't know.
It's a good question.
Well,
That could be an
probably coaching and
opportunity.
mentoring.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
career
that's
coaching.
for sure.
Then the schedule's basically self-driven, self-designed. It's a, it's a one-on-one relationship that could live for a year or for the rest of their lives. So
Mentorship to any chapter around the country.
Well, and I know Brett well, a good example of this is he could do a module on development,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
Training.
Or like you were saying, Greg, like, you know, based on your career, can you come in via Zoom to a chapter or even come in once to a local chapter and do something impactful around, you know, if you're in sales, do something impactful around recruitment or.
I was just about to bring up, that was part of the question I was asking earlier is, are we getting to a point where we hopefully can pass some of this off to volunteers? It's something the three of us will talk about later, based on our conversations with chapter presidents, that I think more and more, we're gonna have to start relying on volunteers more. And so, and even with the campaign conversation, as we start to whittle down our priorities as a fraternity, we have to decide what things can we no longer pay for, and that means finding people that can do things that we're not paying them to do. So I think it's really crucial and a really good direction that we're heading. So thank you, Wendell, for your work on that.
Thank you.
Many of these modules are things that we could also use for the various levels of a Sigma or a Phi or
Yeah.
wherever you are, and for the learning communities as part of their programming. To be able to say, you know, this, we're gonna watch this video or hear this speaker either in person or something that's been recorded and provided.
But I think it's so important to get our volunteer training standardized and streamlined, and it just, particularly if we're going to ramp up to
That's exactly.
thousands of, I mean, it's an essential part of how we succeed here. So thank you, Wendell. Very, very important.
It'll certainly tie into what we've been talking about all morning too, because as you engage these guys to that, they learn more. They're more likely to reach for one of their back pockets.
One more question from Daniel McVeigh. He asked, can Wendell end with a song?
You keep asking, he's gonna do it.
I have no music, but I'm sure I could come up with something. So
Wendell, Daniel's already been drinking, so you don't need to worry about that.
let's see here. You want to hear something? I can do something real quick.
All right, Wendell.
Let's see. I have to find it here.
Joe Langella's requested Old Blue Eyes.
Oh, you guys are too hard for me. So this is, here we go. This is, I don't know where my, out of the tree of life, I just picked me a plum. You came along and everything started to hum. Well, it's a real good bet. The best is yet to come. Yeah. All right. I look forward to the next update and let you know. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendell.
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Great.
Brian Tinslinger chimed in, don't forget to tip your server. Okay. Okay, our next group is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Our chairman, Michael Serafin, is running a golf tournament for his job today, and we were hoping he was going to finagle a way to be here, and just can't get it. The teams are playing very slowly this morning, so I'll be running through, as the staff liaison, I'll be running through their report. Michael prepared it and got me prepped just in case. But Dave Calderon serves as our board liaison, and so please back me up, Dave, if you're my backup dancer if one is required. So to everyone at home, I'm Heather Matthews, and I am the Chief Communication Officer and serve as the staff liaison to the DEI committee. And so let me just get our slide up here. Okay, let me just get it shared on Zoom. Sorry. There we go. Okay, we should be good here. Yes. Okay, I think we are good. Okay, since we saw you last in December at your board meeting when we reported out, the DI committee has had a change in leadership. And so Michael Seraphin, who has been on the committee, more than a year, but I think maybe since it started even as a task force, is our new chairman and has been doing a really good job at refocusing us and figuring out the best way for us to move to real action, which I think it is refreshing and positive for the group. The things that we have been working on that we want to share with you today. One is I would say 5 big bullets. So the first is about a year ago, we really started to look at our communications and how we infused inclusion and celebration of our diverse brotherhood in our communications and throughout. And so a big piece of that is on social media. And so on a very regular basis, we are now telling stories about celebrating our brothers' identities, their backgrounds, their cultures, and we do that in a very personal way. So I have a couple of examples that you'll see here, but on a monthly basis, when there is a cultural awareness month, so for example, this is Pride Month, on a weekly basis, we're telling a member story. It could be an alum, it could be an undergraduate, about what being, in this case, what being a trans member of SigEp is like, what being Black in SigEp or Black in America is like in February. Last month, we had Asian American Pacific Islander Month and told 4 or 5 stories of brothers there. Nathan was one of those, so thank you for sharing. And what we're finding is that the people sharing are getting, that's not Nathan, but no, they're getting personal outreach from brothers in that community saying, hey man, I really appreciate you sharing. I'm also in this community. I'm also gay in SigEp, and your story is really helped me know what community I belong to, or that there's others out there like me. And that it's really just exciting to see the feedback coming from those. Nathan, I know you got great outreach. Do you want to speak to what that was like?
Yeah, shortly after the post went up, I had a young alumni message me on Instagram and say, hey, I struggled for the longest time about finding somebody that I identified with in the chapter. I had really great friends, people I considered to be brothers, but nobody that I felt understood where I came from. And I think this might be what pushes me over the edge to get connected with the community more, and to learn about my culture and to kind of celebrate my culture more publicly. So he and I have been talking for like 3 weeks now.
Yeah, and it's just it's really personal and really vulnerable, and we get just really good feedback and personal commentary when we do that. So you see those on almost a weekly basis, especially around our cultural months. And in addition to that, we also celebrate holidays from all the cultures, as well as things like other elements of diversity. So Veterans Day or Memorial Day, or different jobs our folks may have. So like Teachers Week or Armed Forces Day, or frontline folks or police things. So we're really looking at how do we celebrate people, their backgrounds, their identities throughout our communications. We're also very excited for the journal to come out. The committee did quite a bit of work. It comes out next week. You'll see it in your mailboxes. But looking at how do we tell diverse stories of brotherly love throughout all of our publications. And so I think you'll see that firsthand in our first reprinted issue of the journal. In addition to communications, one of the things that came out of Conclave, so the undergraduate said, this is important to us, is how do we measure if we are getting better at inclusion? And so they asked the fraternity, we need to do an annual assessment around cultural competence, and is it improving? And so our committee worked with Dyad Strategies, who does our annual brotherhood assessment each fall. And as a part of that assessment this year, it will include, it's about 10 questions, but new measures around cultural competence. So things like, how aware are you of other cultures? How do you build relationships with people of other cultures? How do you, and what do you do with that, with those relationships or that information? So that is both on an individual level, as well as what does that look like when you're in a group? So those will be new questions. We've also enhanced our demographic questions, and then we'll continue to ask things around openness to diversity, empathy, which really start to connect DEI with brotherly love. So we're excited to look at how brotherhood and belonging connect more with diversity and inclusion with these new survey questions this fall. The big third piece was also coming out of Conclave. Our undergraduates said, look, our chapters need more resources and education around this area. And so we're looking at how our existing programs like the BMP or SigEp learning communities, how we can infuse inclusion and fostering it throughout those programs. So we're currently doing an audit of the BMP and SLC resources and looking at, okay, what does it mean for a Sigma to learn about inclusion? Or what does it mean for a brother mentor to learn about inclusion? What does inclusion have to do with intellectual development or wellness or leadership or professional? And we'll be looking to infuse the BMP app and our other resources with new suggested activities and new programmatic ideas. As part of that, we reached out to every chapter that we're aware of that has a VP of DEI. So several have instituted that. And we had a focus group of those undergraduates to really ask them about what success they've been having, what challenges they've met, what's happening on their campus, their resources. So really looking at digging in with our undergraduate men about what they want to see in this area. And the cool thing about that group, well, lots of cool things, but one was they said, hey, we actually want to keep meeting together. This has been really helpful, especially since there's only a few of us. So I think that was a really good thing, or a cool moment that happened last month. And then two final things that are more on the, I would say administrative front, but are really important. And so one is that out of Conclave, the undergraduate said, look, we want to make sure our language and our procedures and policies is inclusive. And so we're doing an audit with Dave leading the charge over here of our grand chapter bylaws to make sure that the language in that is inclusive, and that when an undergraduate or a volunteer reads it, that no matter what their background is, they can relate to the information. And then two is looking at, as SigEp, do we have a philosophy or a commitment statement around DEI? And so we're looking at that as a long-term sort of North Star for the committee. And Dave and his subgroup has done quite a bit of research in other areas, other higher education institutions, nonprofits, corporations, about what really belongs in a statement like that. And so we're in the drafting phase of that. So I think that is work product you'll expect to see far before your next meeting from us. Those are the things that we have been actively working on. Some are ongoing. Communications that is ongoing. We'll probably report out every time on what's new there. And then some that we're looking forward or are implementing and looking forward to continue implementing. The piece that is part of our charge that we haven't really cracked open yet is how do we create diverse AVCs, and what does that mean to be a diverse AVC? What does that add? That was another charge out of Conclave. And so we're really looking at how to get that started. We're collecting some demographics with the staff, and I expect that'll be a big thing that we report out on next time our progress. So with that, I will take questions, and Dave, I'll ask for your help in answering anything. But, yeah.
I have one quick question. You may have covered this. I was dealing with something else, but one of the things I think when I was on the committee before was that we talked a lot about I'm not suggesting, I'm asking the question, about a staff person that would be assigned in terms of all aspects. SigEp, whatever it is, whatever we're doing. Have you all discussed that? Full-time staff person
For DEI.
Yeah.
for DEI, I'm sorry, yes.
So I think coming out of the task force, when we presented the recommendations to the board, that was one where at the time, especially in the pandemic, that it wasn't going to be possible financially as really we weren't adding staff at that time. I do think as we look at the way that we're doing the work, it could be a piece of what the director of education does, because rather than having a diversity program, we want to infuse it. And it could make sense because that person's planning volunteer education, undergraduate education. So I think that's a partial answer, but I'd be interested in Brian's thoughts as well.
Well, I think the two things that we've wrestled with is one, how do we make sure that the thread is pulled throughout everything that we do, and just hiring one person and asking that one person to have ownership minimize the likelihood that we're able to actually pull that thread and really weave DEI into BMP, SigEp learning community efforts, volunteer education efforts, and volunteer recruitment efforts, undergraduate recruitment efforts, anything there. And I think the other thing beyond that is there's a need to staff up coming out of a pandemic. And we're talking about adding a significant number of new positions already in this budget that we believe are fundamental to our ability to get to a place where we could feel very comfortable about staffing for DEI or even mental health or another area of the plan. And so for now, we've said, look, let's understand how it should be inserted into every aspect of what we do before we try to hire someone to do a job.
Yeah, there's still aspects of the issue or the problem that we're wrapping our hands around in terms of the data sets and things of that nature. Like the stuff with Dyad, we've asked them to look at in terms of cultural competence and things of that nature. So we're really looking more on, I think, in terms of mission statements and what we already have, things that we can do to reflect our commitment to diversity within the fraternity. Yeah.
I think the original conversation we had was, we keep saying we're committed to diversity, but there's nobody at headquarters or nobody in staff working on this. So even if it's education, then it could be somebody that's part of their job, which I think would answer a question.
Yeah.
Particularly as we move forward. And, I'm sure Regina has the same thing. We have a chief diversity officer at Georgia. And Michelle, anything comes up with diversity, everybody sends it to her and says your responsibility. And the president has said, no, it's everybody's responsibility. So I kind of like the idea of, infusing it with, it's a part of the fabric of, you don't have one person who's just working on that. I do think that, being able to say that we have somebody who is focusing on this work and the importance of our work, because as Billy said last night, our fraternity looks differently now. This board looks differently now.
So let me,
you know what I'm saying? And so I think that's probably a good way to do it through education. So I appreciate it, Heather. Sorry, Greg.
so I don't know if you can see me or not, but the question I have is the beginning of diversity is how we show up as an organization. We talked a little bit about some diversity on the board, diversity on our headquarters staff, diversity on ABC boards, diversity in our chapters. How are we moving towards that? It feels like we're still a white guy fraternity to me. I think we've done really well on our staff by recruiting and hiring women. I think we've done fairly well in LGBTQ plus people. But how do we look compared to the markets that we do business in, including Richmond?
Yeah, so what I would say is, one, from the staff front, we, in the last year, so we actually reported this out about a year ago, but we went through an audit of our HR practices to make sure that the way that we recruit staff, and even the words we use, the language we use, the titles that we use, the platforms that we use, we are actively recruiting and are open to diverse populations. And I think if you look at the pages on the website, you'll actually see a lot more visible racial diversity. Now, that is obviously not the only characteristic by any means, but it is a focus as we recruit staff. We are also posting jobs. And we've always posted them openly, but for example, RD, a lot of people felt like you had to know somebody to get into that pipeline. And you've even seen us do social media campaigns around what it means to work on staff, what the job is really like. And in those, we use some of our staff members of color so that people can see, look, there are people like me in Richmond, and the fraternity values my voice. And so I think that has been a win. The other piece of it with recruitment, with our undergraduate membership, racially, we're about 21% non-white. But when you start to look at other markers, which in some institutions, when you're at the University of Iowa, we're probably overperforming. If we're in other places, we're probably underperforming. So we are actually in the strategic plan looking at how do we measure how we are related to our specific campus environment. And so getting a handle on how we know that, because that's what really matters versus globally. There's other markers though that I think are really important. And someone asked a question in here about recruitment specifically, and will the marketing materials help us that Darren talked about in his growth report? Right now on your average campus, which I'd love your perspective, about 33% of our students are first generation.
Yeah.
Some that's even much higher, some it's lower, but about a third of students are first generation students. These are students whose parents weren't in college, much less in fraternities and sororities. Only 15% of our membership is first generation. So if you look at that 1 in 11, those are the other 10 out of the 11 students that Darren talked about. Many of them don't know what even fraternity means. And so those new marketing materials that we've talked about are really, really critical to help explain what SigEp is to students who have no real tie to college. So I think that's another element of diversity, as well as creating access through things like the Balanced Hand Scholarship.
Yeah, it feels like an opportunity there. And I'll just, again, what I know, Louisville's about 11% African-American, the university. The city's about 30%. So there's already an economic barrier to post-secondary education for people that are suffering from economic space. So it seems to me like there's an opportunity to increase our commitment to diverse membership by going outside our traditional ways of recruiting.
And I would say it's a moral imperative, and it's also an imperative to survive, because the collegiate enrollment is getting more and more diverse over time. And so if we want to survive and we want to thrive, we have to find a way to reach populations who, are non-white, frankly. So I think it's mission critical for many ways. And then I think too, there's some really exciting opportunities there. When you look at the dyad data, and Billy did a podcast, and this is one of the things that you and Gentry talked about on your recent video, is when you look at this, where belonging is really connecting and where brotherhood is really connecting. When you look at places like Hispanic serving colleges and institutions, belonging's off the charts. They're having a fundamentally rich, exciting experience in SigEp. And a piece of that is related to how they express culture and what brotherhood means to them. And so I think that things like that present a real opportunity for the future.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to promote diversity inside of a chapter or otherwise is to experience different cultures living with you. And then that gets down to the notion of recruitment. So no better way to learn about another person and their culture, or their background, or whatever, than to actually live with them, and vice versa.
Heather, I was going to observe, I don't think that the 8 required training modules that Wendell talked about. I don't think one of those related to cultural competence, and it would seem to be vitally important that all persons who are interacting with our chapters are participating in some training around cultural competence, because those folk play such an important role in creating a welcoming and inclusive environment within our chapters. So
Totally
needs to be added to the list.
Totally.
So now we have 9 instead of 8.
Well, the problem with that though too is that, and I'm not maybe necessarily speaking to student directors in this room, but I find a lot of times undergrads are very hesitant to push back on alums. And so if these are folks that are coming in that are volunteering, you know, they're going to kind of go, well, what do? We can't say anything. And so if the volunteers themselves have the cultural competence, I think you're right, that will help some too. Because students aren't going to challenge that. Somebody comes in and says something inappropriate or in a voluntary capacity. I wouldn't have I would now, but I would have at 21 years old. So.
It seemed like a lot of the presentation for DEI was about folks that are already in or that are going forward, and not as much about recruitment. And when we're talking about modules, it's probably something that should be done for the recruitment chairs, added to that as we go to Carlson's or Rux or wherever we are, as we make it part of that process. How do you reach out to what's the best way to approach folks that we otherwise have not or been able to access before?
Billy, you were going to say something earlier, but
well, one observation, and I have a question first, though. So Heather, and I might have covered this with Gentry on the podcast, can't remember. We measure first generation college students, and we measure race or ethnicity, color. Do we measure sexual orientation?
We sure do.
And what's our number with self-identifying brothers who are identified as gay, or I guess transgender or bisexual or whatever?
I do not know it offhand, but I will pull it up.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And so that's, I mean, what's counted counts. So if we're counting it, that's a good thing. I think ultimately all of us just want to see the needle moving in the right direction, and that'll let us know we're on target, because some of this is art, not science. You know, it's trying to figure out where the touch points are with not just with our undergrads, but with our alums. And then I guess an observation or a thought might be that I wonder if there might be an opportunity to do collaborative programming with a traditionally African-American fraternity or sorority on a national basis. In other words, encouraging, I'm going to guess at most of the places where we have a SigEp chapter, there's an Omega Psi Phi chapter, or there's an Alpha Phi Alpha chapter, or there's an African-American sorority. And my guess is that if we have I mean, for example, I think Sigma Chi and a sorority do derby days together, don't they?
Yeah.
Or some, there's some programs.
That's several sororities.
There were several
Depending on the
sororities.
campus.
So I'm thinking something like that, where not necessarily a fundraiser, not necessarily but it could be, I mean, it could be whatever it is, but to try to encourage, because I know for a fact that there's a yearning inside of the traditionally African-American organizations as well to encourage their members to get out of their bubbles and to engage. And I think if there's an interest in those organizations, and we have a similar interest, it seems to me that'd be just a home run opportunity to just be present. And for a lot of our undergraduate members, my guess is that may be one of the rare opportunities they have to engage with people that don't look like them, right? It just, sometimes you have to program it because it doesn't otherwise naturally happen. I mean, let's be honest, right? So just a thought.
Or even going beyond, say, the African-American fraternity thing, go to African-American organizations on campus, or Latin American, or Asian Pacific Islander, the leadership programs, like the business the business clubs or the different leadership groups on campus. And also it helps recruitment in the broad sense because, our guys are a lot of times still used to fishing in the same pond, and they keep catching the same fish. Expand that pond or go to a different pond, do what you need to do to expand that basket. But yeah, even beyond the Greeks who are already affiliated with someone else, you find great people that aren't affiliated with any Greek organization, but are SigEps and they just don't know it.
Well, the beautiful thing about doing something
gotta tell them
collaboratively with,
Yeah.
say, an African-American, I just say that is, it could be a traditionally Jewish fraternity like Sammy, if that's still their reality. I just think that where there's not a dual incentive for us to be there or them to be there. In other words, if we're doing something with Alpha Phi Alpha, we're obviously not there to recruit them, nor are they there to recruit us. Everybody's already joined the team. We're there to meet and get to know each other and maybe engage in a common cause to achieve some kind of goal, or maybe it's a social event. Maybe it's a collaborative social event. I don't know what it is. It just seems to me that the more we encourage our members to engage with people that aren't like them, that cultural competence goes up more organically than it might if we're doing it through, programming.
Mhm.
Do you guys do anything like that?
I was just gonna throw in, actually.
Yeah, we actually do. Every year we support and donate to Alpha Phi Alphas. They have their golden gala that they do, which is their scholarship banquet. So we actually donate to that. We've been doing that now for 6 years. And
Donate money.
yeah, we donate money, and then they invite us out there and we attend their event. And then in terms of incorporating just with all the different multicultural organizations, we've hosted tailgates with Gamma Eta. We've hosted it with Alpha Kappa Alpha. So we actively try and do that in terms of service events, inviting them to our socials, pairing with them, and then supporting their own
I'm
scholarships.
gonna guess that's more evolved than 98% of our chapters. I mean, that's great. I'm gonna,
99.
yeah, no, I mean, in other words, I think there's an example of it done well. And so how do we be intentional about maybe designing for that on a broader scale? I don't know the answer, but I love the thought.
Right.
I was just gonna say, I think, we've talked about how to do it and we haven't actually done it, right? So I think it's if there was some sort of guidance around a template and not, that's making it sound too programmed almost, but how do we approach these organizations and say, this is what we'd like to do, or what's an example of something that we could do? I think the problem with a national partnership is, one, that's not going to exist on every campus. It's not going to be possible to do on every campus. Two, we have some of those, we have a partnership with 80 Pi that we have an 80 Pi chapter on our campus and we don't do that with them. So it's not guaranteed to work even if there is that situation. I think it would almost just be better for, how can we take what Florida's doing and tell other chapters how to start those relationships and build up that programming organically rather than there's this national partnership, just plug and play.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I even think a national partnership is a good idea. It might be something as simple as making it a part of the balanced van program.
Sure.
And just simply saying that one of the expectations is that you'll do a collaborative co-curricular type activity with a non-traditional,
Or another
Caucasian.
thing too that we have missed out on and could do is we have a lot of chapters in cities where there's an HBCU.
Mhm.
And there is a feeling by some, I'm not saying all, that they're scared. We're scared to get together, and I think it's on both sides. And so maybe, if you're in a city where there's a HBCU that one of our chapters could go over, and even if they don't have an Alpha Phi Alpha chapter, whatever the case may be, but use it as a learning experience to say, like you're doing, like you were saying on your campus, we could also use HBCUs because they're in cities where we have a lot of
Love it.
chapters.
Love it.
And so I think, Greg is right. I think that the forced programming sometimes doesn't work. But I know when I was at the College of Charleston, they had this program called Battle of the Party Walks. And what they did was, the African-American fraternities do step shows. But what they did was Sigma Chi and A Phi A got together and they would have 12 members, 6 white guys and 6 black guys, and they would step. And then the sororities would do that, and so they would ballot. And I would tell you, like, Dr. King could come from the grave and he'd get less people show up than they would at the College of Charleston at ballot party walks. Because it was a big thing on campus. It was something that didn't happen. It brought folks together. So I think programs like that, we can do more, that I think would also help.
Do we have a headquarters relationship with these other traditionally African-American or Jewish fraternities?
Not really, but it wouldn't be hard to reach out to them. I mean, we go to
If they
events.
have staffs, some of them don't have staffs and are entirely volunteer led. If they do have staffs, by and large, we know somebody on their team, but it's less formalized.
And the thing we have to remember too is there's also, I know at Georgia, I don't know about Mississippi State, other campuses, we have a growing multicultural Greek council. And there are, I can't tell you the names because I'm just not good, and I have to admit that I'm bad at that. But we have Asian American male fraternities, Asian American female, we have Latinx, we have, I mean.
In California,
Indian,
you
we
have all those.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so all of those are really coming, and actually in terms of expansion, we have 3 groups now that want to, national organizations who are under multicultural Greeks that want to come to the University of Georgia. And we don't know if we're going to be able to explain it. So I mean, so again, there's African American, there's Jewish, there's Latinx, there's Indian.
I think it's about educating the local chapters on giving them tools on how to reach out to them, how to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Because like, I know when we reached out to Alpha Kappa Alpha and Gamma Eta and asked them to do socials, they're like, we've never had any IFC chapter ask us to do anything. Like no one had ever asked them, and they're like, yeah, we'll do it. Like, it's the fact that no one's ever asked them. And I think that's the same thing at all college campuses, that they've just never been asked to do something outside of their council.
It is a great opportunity because we're always first.
It's kind of the tragedy of the whole situation, right? I mean, we all assume that we're all talking to each other. We're not. I mean, I tell chapters all the time, like one chapter I've been working with, I told them they were struggling with recruitment. I said, go down, meet the ROTC folks, go down and meet the athletes, go meet the students at the LGBT group on campus, meet kids at the handicap group on campus, and they did that, and they recruited from those, and they said each one of those groups said no fraternity has ever asked to come speak to our kids before. Never. What? How could that be? Right? But we assume, right? So that no one's ever asked before. So I really do think that, we should just assume this is a novel idea, because
So
there's
I'm
a real
gonna-
good chance that it is.
I'll put my higher ed hat on for just a second. Not that I ever take it off, but very supportive of this conversation. I think it's just really important that the chapter has to be ready
Well, that's true.
to be able to build those relationships and have members who aren't the people who've always been there. And if we put a mandate in ballot span or some other sort of formalized way to push chapters into relationship, then we have to, on the back end, prepare them to have actually welcoming environments so that when students arrive there, they aren't marginalized or traumatized by having this awful experience in this group that I thought was inviting me in, but actually wasn't ready for me. So I think there's just a balance there and just a tiny little soapbox maybe
Well,
to
and I've got a-
articulate.
I've got a great example of it. When I was an undergraduate, my chapter did recruit handicapped students, and year after year, we would have handicapped students join. They were never in a wheelchair. And so for whatever, one of our brothers joined in a wheelchair, and we realized he couldn't get in the damn house. It had never occurred to, we didn't have a ramp. And the house was, now this was 1980 something, so it was clearly not accessible in any way, but we fixed it. Why? Because we had to. No one thought about whether we were ready for a brother in a wheelchair. But by God, when he showed up, we got ready. I mean, sometimes you gotta sort of, you gotta meet the moment, right?
Absolutely.
So, But I appreciate those comments.
Yeah, and my comment shouldn't be interpreted as we should not be actively engaging communities outside of those that are traditionally involved in the organizations, but instead just that it's not just as simple as inviting the alphas to have a social or going to an organization and saying, oh, hey, have you ever considered joining SigEp?
Or for that matter,
more to that.
Or for that matter, it's not as simple as recruiting athletes.
No.
I mean, there are some chapters who have development programs or other requirements that simply aren't designed around meeting the demands of a student athlete's reality and allowing them to go through our programming on their schedule, because they don't control a lot of their schedule, unlike most of us. So there are many reasons to be careful about that.
The learning communities, we now encourage, it's not a requirement, but encourage a philanthropic event outside of your core group. But what I found in most of the young kids today, that's not really, they don't really think of it. It's not an issue for them about color, about sexual orientation or anything like that. They really don't think too hard on that. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some of your chapters are designed differently, but not the ones that I've seen.
So what I was going to say is, I think a lot of the things that we've come up with as ideas in the past several minutes are really great things to put on a list of suggestions for a chapter to employ. And I don't know, if it were me, I would have one of the potential RD outcomes for the RD visit to be formulate a DEI plan or come up with a DEI initiative for your chapter. Because I'll tell you, my chapter on our campus is bigger than the NPHC and the MGC combined. So we're not having a collaborative event with one chapter. I mean, it just logistically we can't do it. I mean, and so there's certain things that we can't, I don't think, really say at all. You know,
but there are some great HBCUs in it.
Right, there are.
Or better yet, Nathan, I think under Regina's suggestion about the cultural competency training for volunteers, that could be part of that. Because I think they'd be better driven by volunteers on the local level to help lead and suggest and guide that kind of activity as well. I think that's.
And I think a template for a committee, a group within the chapter that you guys talked about developing, so that they've got kind of a roadmap. Is this what our DEI committee would look like within our chapter, what they could do?
So I think the takeaway is, because I know we have a break coming up, but is it needs to be a part of the thread of what we do. It needs to be a part of our overall experience versus a DEI program. And it needs to be suggestions and tools that chapters can use or make their own or say, I need more help with, versus like anything that's, you've got to do this or mandate, but like it's going to look different at Georgia Tech than it does at Iowa, than it does at Dartmouth, just like everything else that we do. So.
Question. So the volunteer development module training stuff, do we have any ambition in doing any kind of educational programming like in that format for undergraduates?
Like certification?
Not certification, but it's some kind of like, you know, so to back some context up, from an IFC conversation we talked to a bunch of the sororities and they were stunned that we had no nationally provided education on sexual violence. They said all of our nationals make us do a 30-minute, e-learning thing. You guys like, and not a single one of our chapters, not like SigEp, not a single one of our 30 IFC chapters had any kind of national program for that. So that's
I
kind of
would
where that
call
comes
BS
from.
on that, just to be frank. Like
Yeah.
there are organizations that
Well,
do.
if they do, the officers that answered
Yeah.
didn't know about it, which is also a problem.
Which is part of the problem.
I think the difference is though is much of what sororities do is nationally mandated and people, I'll just be frank, I worked at one for 10 years. You go into the online system, they leave it running, they check it through, and then they move on. And like, I think the beauty of the balanced man program or the things that we provide is like, it is to use the point Darren always makes, when you co-create your own experience, you take you are empowered to live that experience versus I have to sign on, I've got to take my mandated alcohol program, I don't care about it. So I think that there is a point to what is the baseline that everyone needs or needs to have available to them? Like the volunteer training, like there are so many things that we could put into the BNP app that are there that you guys, like there could be a module on, I mean, anything around inclusion. That's what we're looking at, or sexual violence or anything. But to mandate it, I think almost takes the power out of it.
Yeah, I guess the perspective I've had for a lot of it, whether it be DEI or whatever the hot button issue is, right, is that there's a lot of programming that I think should be led and run by either volunteers or older members at the chapter level, but I don't know if they should also be building most of the curriculum, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, our chapter does DEI education for new members, but it's like, it's built by a couple 20-year-olds who, may not have ever left the state of Georgia.
Yeah, and
So
I think
it's
that's
like-
what we're looking to do is put modules and put things into so that you can pick them up and use them.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chuck Stegman. It's nice being with you again. I'm calling you from sunny Palm Springs where it's 103 degrees and I'm very thankful for air conditioning. I'd like to talk to you about two basic questions that came out of the written report. And one is, what's the impact I envision for the committee and where are we at in the committee's work? And go. Is that not going? So first, the impact. Successful chapters have to have a plan. Chapters without a plan end up operating far less effectively, and planning how a chapter spends its time and its money must be a joint project of the executive board. The bylaws say the vice president of finance is responsible for the budget and the vice president of programming is responsible for the calendar. I'm working with a great brother. He's a sophomore, a vice president of finance. He joined last fall. And for a moment, I'd like you to try and imagine yourself in his place. Remember, he joined during COVID when the chapter was basically shut down, and his predecessor's experience was entirely during that same time. Without a plan, he basically has one thing to do his planning based off of, and that's the checking balance. So for example, the VP of recruitment comes to him and says they want to know how much they can afford for the Balanced Man Scholarship in the fall. And frankly, he really needed to know that last March, since that's when headquarters sends out the promotion to the high school counselors. And how much can we afford? And what about the banquet or the reception cost? Oh, and what about t-shirts? Meanwhile, the VP of programming comes to him and wants to sign an agreement for a venue for the formal next spring. They book up a year in advance and needs $1,000 deposit now. Can he do that? And the VP of communication comes to him with an alumni newsletter that's going out next week and wants to know whether they're doing anything special for homecoming. How much can we spend on homecoming? You put yourself in his shoes for a moment, looking at that one number, and if you're not able to answer those questions, you're not alone. So what might a plan for a chapter's time and money look like? Well, in real life, it's normally an iterative process. Let's just look. This is just a sample calendar from a chapter on a commuter campus. They chose to do a lot of events, many of them very low cost because they wanted to spend as much time together as possible. And because they're a commuter campus and a lot of their brothers work, it's hard to get everybody to anything on any particular day. So they did all this and they went ahead and got their committee chairman to go ahead and come up with costs for all of these. And if that's the budget for the time, then this might be an example of how that would work out in a budget. And the first thing I want you to notice is that this budget is calendarized. So you can see that it's not just how much money you take in at the beginning of the year and how much you end up at the end of the year. You got to worry about when it hits. So if you look at this, you can see that there's a big problem in October, after the Balanced Man Scholarship has been done, and after formal rush has been done, and after the headquarters bill is hit. And guess which one is most likely to get slipped if you can't do all three? The headquarters bill. And part of the point I'm trying to make is that if chapters aren't planning for their calendars and their budget together, and with all of the committee chairmen or the executive board putting in their stuff together, you can end up with some really bad problems. Or to put it another way, chapters have a hierarchy of needs, and I'm going to assume that most people here are familiar with the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But in short, if you don't have enough to eat, the base in red, it's not the right time to start talking about the higher levels like building esteem. And I believe a similar concept applies to chapters. If a chapter is struggling to fill officer positions or pay current bills, the chapter is unlikely to be leaders on campus or in the community, unlikely to have a stellar Balanced Man program, and unlikely to get accredited as a learning community. Maybe the layers, starting from the bottom, are how are we going to make it through this term? And next level up, how are we going to make it through next year? And then in the green, are we having fun and building brotherhood? And in the blue, are we building our brothers into balanced men? And in the purple, are we making a difference in the campus and the community? My suggestion is that we'd have more success with the upper layers if we don't assume the lower layers would take care of themselves. So the Finance and Compliance Committee is working to get vice presidents of finance to do budgets and to work with their VPPs to get calendars put together. But that's only one piece of the basic blocking and tackling that I think would benefit us to have some increased focus. I think we'll have a lot more success at our strategic plan if we can get the basics working. So that's where I see the committee fitting in, is almost all of our initiatives have some financial component, and the committee is trying to make sure that we're able to do what needs to be done. We've previously spoken of the 4 charges for the SigEp chapter and ABC Finance Committee. And the first one I want to talk about briefly is Greek Bill. I'm just going to give you a quick update on them. This is the financial tool SigEp integrated with my SigEp that we use to manage chapter and ABC income and expenses and to file chapter and ABC taxes. We have a dedicated support specialist who's working one-on-one with Greek Bill chapters on improving their financial management. And we're working to clearly document more of the how-tos of using the platform. Greek Bill's open their tax wizard and their CPA up to all chapters for filing taxes. And I want to repeat that, all chapters, not just those using Greek Bill. Upcoming features include a button to send people to collection should that become necessary, automatic sync of access. So for example, the VP of Finance will automatically have edit access, and a better visibility for volunteers and the VPFs on what the financial status is. One feature of Greek Bill that a lot of people aren't using enough is the ability to do the membership agreements and similar important documents. If your chapter is a Greek Bill chapter and they're not using that, there's some great news for them. The biggest challenge, I would say, on Greek Bill is the expense side. We've got lots of chapters using it to collect dues, but not nearly enough using it to manage their expenses. They need to manage their expenses for one thing, to do tax filings, and also just to manage the day-to-day operations. In almost every chapter I've worked with that does monthly financial reports, that's one of the first place that problems tend to show up. For example, maybe the VP of membership development isn't doing his job. So that's Greek Bill. Let me talk briefly about training and support. There's very encouraging news here. When we talked in December, we identified a problem of having content but no channel. And that has moved a long way in the right direction. We've since created a welcome email drip for vice presidents of finance, AVC treasurers, and mentors for finance. We've also created a monthly finance newsletter, and we've continued to enhance the resource page on my SigEp. But all of those rely on people reading emails or taking the initiative to go looking on the website. None of them really addresses a VP of finance, a mentor for finance, or an ABC treasurer who doesn't know what they don't know. So I'm really excited that we will have the vice presidents of finance back at Carlson's. That's much more of an opportunity for interactive learning, working with other vice presidents for finance. We have a good curricula to start from, and we're going to tweak it to enhance it with some of the materials that we've already developed. And we're also going to train the regional directors to be able to do a quick triage and help us identify chapters that have problems in finances. The big picture that we focus on, it runs throughout all of the different channels that we're doing, the key responsibilities you see on the left there, and the main deliverables on the right. We found that focusing on the deliverables is a lot more actionable to somebody who's brand new to the position and isn't sure what to start. It's one thing to be told you're in charge of all the finances, and another thing to know that you have to do a monthly financial report. We've made a lot of progress on creating the content and getting it documented and into either the website or the newsletter, and that continues. We've identified some of the most important themes and weave these into all of the materials that we develop. The monthly financial newsletter, we have a 12-month rolling strategy for that, and it's also a great way when we create a new resource or when a new issue rears its head to get people on board. And just today, we completed the third of the 3 onboarding drip campaigns that we wanted to do to get people who are appointed to these positions up to speed quickly. In short, we're making great strides on the training and support aspects of our charge, and we could not have done this without tireless effort from several people at headquarters, particularly Zach Gilman and Melissa Rosner. Moving on to compliance. As you may remember, we started first with focusing on the IRS tax compliance. Many of our chapters are out of compliance with the IRS. The progress on that has been much slower than we'd hoped because the IRS is painfully backlogged. They're taking more than 6 months to start the reinstatement requests. California at Fresno State, for example, sent their request to the IRS on September 20th, and it has not yet been opened. So that's really slowed us down. The IRS is so far behind, they recently destroyed 30 million secondary documents in an attempt to catch up. And they also discontinued the data source Greekville was using for the automated dashboard that we had. So a lot of challenges there working with the IRS. That said, we have completed a big project in getting together a boilerplate of the responses that are necessary to reinstate a chapter and creating a process. The process of getting reinstated is far, far easier than it was when I spoke to you last in December. And on our side, chapters and ABCs are still getting stuck when they're asked for 2 years of financial history. The ones the IRS revoked almost never have any financial records and must recreate it from bank records. The IRS requires each of us to keep certain records for our personal taxes, and the requirements for nonprofits are even more stringent. In time, Greekville will help with this, but only for Greekville chapters. There are other ways to do this that some chapters are working with that can do it, but this is still a big area of challenge, and it goes back to that area of getting chapters using the expense side of Greekville, which will be a major focus for us in the new year. And then the latest status as of the last refresh, we have 116 chapters and 100 that are in good standing and 106 that are either revoked or no data. That includes a handful of ABCs who are using the free Greek bill account, and the 50% threshold applies only to chapters. You may remember from December that one of the challenges we're trying to make sure we don't cross the line is if more than 50% of our chapters have a revoked tax status, then the entire organization can lose its group exemption. We're going to continue our targeted email campaigns, and we hope by having the subject kept front and center, both at the Carlsons and from regional director visits, that we can make more progress on this. But again, it's going to be slow because the IRS is so backlogged. Some of the district governors have asked me to do a better job of looping them in, and we will certainly do that. And one of the biggest steps that will make this a much more doable is a finance dashboard in my SigEp, which Zach Gilman is working on. And there's also, I believe, a plan to hire a chapter financial consultant at headquarters. One of the things that we have not been great at is once we identify a chapter and tell them, okay, here's the steps you need to do, a lot of times that's where it dies. And we need to take more of a case management approach to making sure that they follow through on that. That brings me to the last piece, which is the committee itself. And it's an amazing team, and I can't thank them enough. We stay on the same page with the weekly email update on the many moving pieces, and we use shared Google documents to collaborate. Most weeks, there's yet another thing to review, and there are countless one-on-one phone calls as new issues and opportunities arise. Each of these people brings a different skill set to the table, and each of them has been uniquely valuable. So I'll repeat, we can't thank them enough. We want to continue a robust undergraduate representation and have recruited Ernesto Castro, a new undergraduate member, and we'd like to recruit at least one more undergraduate out of this summer's Ruck Institute. Both Benny and Seamus, who've been our undergraduate representatives, were recruited out of the 2019 virtual Ruck group. Whoops, there we go. To recap, I think the work of the committee is really important to the fraternity in a variety of ways, but the one I'm choosing to focus on right now is in increasing or decreasing the accounts receivable problem from chapters. And I think the most important things we can do there is to work as a team. And I mean, you know, regional directors, the committee, district governors, chapter counselors, to make sure that chapters have a plan in place. Because if they don't have a plan, they're going to be surprised when they run out of money, and the headquarters bill is the first thing they don't pay. So with that quick overview, I'm pretty happy with the progress we've made, and we have a lot more in the hopper, and I'll open it up for questions.
Any questions?
So Chuck, that revoked no data number, is that better or worse than last time you reported to us?
It's moving in the right direction, but not nearly fast enough. It's better.
Okay.
One of the challenges on the no data part is chapters. We recently discovered one, which was Florida Gamma, which had an employee identification number, an EIN from the IRS, but had never filed, and their status was unclear. And it looks like they created the EIN and never applied for it and never got added to the headquarters list of our subsidiaries. And so we think that may be the case for several of the no data ones, that they created the EIN, but somewhere we dropped the ball and never got it into the report that headquarters gives to the IRS and never started reporting on taxes. That's been one of the harder ones to figure out, particularly since the IRS is almost not answering their phones. I work with a CPA who's got a specialist line into the IRS who's been trying for over a year to get me an answer on a pretty simple question, and they just can't get back to this. Other
Chuck,
questions?
Yeah, Chuck, this is Brian. Thanks for all your work, and your report is always so thorough. So really appreciate all the time that you put in to that. You made a comment about the difference between my SigEp and SigEp.org having mentioning a table of contents and an index. What's the recommendation in that part of your report? There looks like there was a potential shortcoming somewhere, but I wasn't quite sure what you were recommending we do.
The issue is that if we put something on the website on SigEp.org, you can search it. There's a search button up in the upper right-hand corner, or even Google can search it.
Right.
If you put it on my SigEp, it's not searchable. And at one point, there was a plan to move everything off of the website and on to my SigEp. And until we get search on my SigEp, I think that would be a very bad mistake. A lot of times when people need help on something, they don't think about it in the terms that we may have used. And the only way to find it is by searching. And the analogy that you're referring to, I said, is it's sort of like my SigEp has a table of contents. So if you think about it the same way that Zach thinks about it, you can probably find it. But if you think about it in a different way, you probably can't find it on my SigEp, but you probably can find it on SigEp.org by just using a good old text search.
So the recommendation is to develop search functionality within my SigEp and to not remove anything from SigEp.org until that search functionality exists.
Absolutely.
Okay, I appreciate you clarifying that. You also mentioned that you had a couple of conversations with other committee chairmen. What were your takeaways from those conversations, and how do they relate to the work that we're trying to do with FinCom?
Obviously the work I'm doing on trying to make sure that the ABC treasurers and the mentors for finance are up to speed is related to the work that Wendell is doing on volunteer training in general. And the conclusion from Wendell was, we're not trying to develop content, so keep developing the content. And if we need to rejigger it into some new format, that shouldn't be too difficult, which I completely agree. So I don't think we have a challenge there. And then there'd been a request from several district governors that we do some more training for them. And I'm more than happy to do that, but we haven't gotten that figured out. And then there's one other, I'm forgetting the third committee that I felt there was some overlap with, or adjacency or something. Pardon?
And Jay in the leadership committee?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is there something that you think that we can do better to facilitate interaction between chairmen, or do you feel it's sufficient for you to just reach out to folks as you see it to be necessary?
I think we're, at least for the areas that I'm working on, I think we're okay now. And the fact that you published the minutes or the reports from the various committees for the last meeting was really helpful, because I took the time to read through that. And that was where I realized that I had some areas where I was working on stuff that I wouldn't say conflicts with, but overlaps or is adjacent to some of the other committees. And it seems like, at least in this area, we're quite a way, we're one of the older committees, and we have developed a lot of content which could be easily put into whatever phrase, whatever framework that Wendell has, I think. The hard work is actually coming up with the content. So when Wendell talked about needing subject matter experts for our areas, I think we've got them, and they're working on creating the content. And if we need to break it into 30-minute videos or 10-minute videos or whatever, I think that will be pretty easy. I'm very excited too about the welcome email drips. One of the complaints I've had from volunteers, and I work with quite a few number of chapters, is that they get appointed and that's it. Never another word. I talked to somebody who'd been ABC secretary for years, and he gets the general emails every alumnus gets, but he's never gotten anything that talked about what he was supposed to do. And I think part of the FinCom committee kind of needs the AVCs to be working well, because the AVCs can provide the long-term vision and the continuity and the, oh yes, we know how to file taxes. We do that every year, because the poor undergrads, they do it one time and then they're done, and they never, that's hard to pass along. We are working with, we have done with Heather's help a campaign to recruit more mentors for finance. We've gone from 85 to 91, moving in the right direction, not fast enough. And we've had pretty good success with encouraging the undergraduate VPS to start mentoring a potential successor in the September, October timeframe, so that that person doesn't come on cold. And that is absolutely a part of our finance newsletter plan for the fall, is to encourage them, if they haven't already done so. Some chapters, larger chapters may have a whole committee working on this. Smaller chapters, it's probably a one-man show, and getting him to start getting somebody else who wants to follow him involved can really make a huge difference. That's one of the strongest recommendations from one of our undergraduate representatives, Seamus.
Couple questions come in. Cliff Canunan asked, is there a list of no data groups that can be reviewed?
Yes. Zach has done a pretty good job of reaching out to chapters and gathering it. And there's really two kinds of no data. One is where we've been unable to determine what their federal tax ID number is. And that is extremely important to figuring out what their status with the IRS is. And those chapters, the ones we don't currently have even an EIN on, are that's a small number. The bigger number is the ones where we've got one, but the IRS sees no record of them. And I think thanks to Steve Channels, we may have figured out how to address that. He's sort of piloting, trying to get his chapter back in good standing with the IRS. And if that works, then we've got a template. And so I think the number of those is on the order of 20. And I think there's 2 or 3 we don't have even an ID number on, and 17 or 18 where we've got an ID number, but the IRS has no record of it. Part of the reason that the ID numbers are so crucial is for historical reasons, and the way this stuff gets done, the vast majority of our chapters show up as Sigma Phi Epsilon Fraternity, Inc., which is the name of the national parent organization. And so if you don't know their ID number, you really can't search for them. And there's ones that we've done and have been abandoned. So the IRS data is pretty messy.
And then Daniel McVeigh asked, of the undergraduates currently on the committee, what are their chapter demographics? Meaning, like, where they're regionally, chapter size, kind of chapter profile, and then also what are you looking for as you look for new undergraduates?
We had 2, and one of them's graduated. He's Benny. He's from a small chapter in Kentucky, unhoused, and Seamus is from a very strong chapter in Montana, and I believe also unhoused. So a housed chapter, a bigger one, would be good balance. The new person actually who volunteered when I asked him to help me find somebody is from the Sac State, which is a small unhoused restart chapter that's doing quite well. So what I'd say the biggest missing piece is somebody from a bigger housed chapter who might identify issues that the rest of us are not clear on. That said, Steve Channels is extremely involved and he's pretty good at keeping us from missing those issues.
Florida has volunteered to recommend someone, Chuck, if you're looking.
Awesome. Please,
It's ready.
Anything else?
Chuck, I'll just say this, it's Billy Madeline. Thank you for the invaluable support that you provide for Sigma Phi Epsilon. You and your committee do just probably largely unheralded work. My guess is this is, as you know, for some of us, this is sexy stuff, money and finances, but for others, it's, they'd rather have their teeth drilled. So you guys are doing great work and it is appreciated, and you're probably going to save us from getting closed down by the IRS if we don't look out. So you might go down in SigEp history as a white hat guy if you're not careful. So look out.
Well, I would also say that in working with a number of chapters, I keep running into situations, and this is probably more true for smaller chapters, say 50 and under, where they have huge accounts receivable problems. And every time I stumble on one, I'm like, well, this is going to be the one where I try all the time-tested procedures and they don't work. But it hasn't been. Bill, you'll remember the chapter at Fresno State that in 1 year went from membership in the teens, membership still a problem, but I give that for context. They owed headquarters 13 grand and they had 13 grand in accounts receivable, much of it from alumni who'd left campus. And in, I guess it's about 3 or 4 months, by just doing the things that are in the grand chapter bylaws, they ended up the year with 0 debt to headquarters and I think $250 in remaining accounts receivable. Wow. And that really happened over a period of about 3 or 4 months just by doing what the grand chapter bylaws say that you should do. And it's worked like that with more chapters than I can count. So I think that's part of what I'm hoping is if we can help the regional directors spot those problems and if not solve them, at least identify, hey, we've got a big accounts receivable problem at this chapter, the AVC or somebody needs to get involved, and then they go on with their other work. That may not seem like a big thing to you guys, but to me, it's really huge because so much of the rest of the stuff we do depends upon somebody opening up an email that we send them. And those are really easy to ignore if it's something kind of hard.
Well, you're appreciated. Just make sure you give that to your committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it. Thanks, Chuck.
All right, next we have Joe Langella, the chairman of the District Governor Committee.
One more to this.
Oops. What?
One more.
Okay,
Oh.
Joe, are you with us? Here you are.
Little Joe.
Yeah, here we go. I heard someone say that. I don't.
Hey, Joe.
Hi, everybody.
That's a grand
How are you all doing?
Doing well. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, and please do not ask me to sing.
Duly noted.
Okay, very good. As is mentioned, I'm the chair of the District Governor Committee, and the members of the committee include Ryan Hayes from District 4, Matt Beck, our District Governor in District 25, And because our previous committee member, Brian Tenslinger, has moved to Richmond, we needed to replace him with someone who is trying to fill his shoes, Joel Saslaw. So Joel is now a new member of the committee. Joel is the district governor in District 34, Colorado and Wyoming. So our committee was originally charged with the responsibility of recommending best practices and action steps to recruit, train, and manage district governors. And before we did that, we committed to redistricting the country first. We felt that was critical to do before we move forward with any other district committee work. So the district governor committee has spent a lot of time with the redistricting. As you all know, we did redistrict the country. We have now 39 districts. With that redistricting, we had lots of vacancies, and also some district governors, I think, use it as an opportunity to bow out. Because there were so many vacancies initially, we spent a lot of time working with headquarters staff to try and fill those vacancies. And we've made a tremendous amount of progress in filling district governor vacancies. We still do have some vacancies, but that largely is now on Brian Tenslinger's plate. We certainly talk to Brian about the vacancies on a regular basis. We're in regular contact with Brian, and we are still helpful in that regard, but we've pivoted to begin to focus on the kind of training and managing portion of the charge of the committee when it comes to district governors. And so we are working with Brian Tenslinger on that right now, working with him to develop curriculum first and foremost for the August 19 and 20 district governor training event that we'll have in Dallas, later this summer. And we're working on developing the curriculum for that as we speak. We have been in contact, for example, with Chuck Stegman and his committee about the importance of having some training and development around helping our AVCs comply with local, state, and federal 501c7 guidelines and IRS requirements. And we hope that that's going to be a big part of that training and development with the district governor training weekend coming up. Additionally, we'll be spending a lot of time working with district governors on and sharing ideas about how to best recruit volunteers in your district. That's really our primary responsibility as district governors. How to use my SigEp more efficiently and effectively to recruit volunteers. And what are the other things that other district governors are doing to recruit volunteers in their districts? And then finally, it's an opportunity for district governors to get to know each other, to do some networking, develop some camaraderie, and we really look forward to this event. We're also focused with Brian on developing volunteer training curriculum for headquarters staff. So Brian has indicated to me just the other day that he's got 8 different volunteer training modules that he'll be working on with the new regional director staff that comes in next week. And so that's very encouraging. District governors have given us feedback in the past that they felt that regional directors might not be as adept in working with volunteers as they are with undergraduate brothers. And we think that that's going to have to change if we're to move in the direction of recruiting 15,000 engaged volunteers for our chapters and the fraternity at large. So these are the things that we're working on as a committee very closely with Brian. And I'll stop there. I will say, I want a special thank you to all the board members for all your help in getting district governors appointed promptly. We do rely on you to speak with a district governor candidate and approve their appointment. And we appreciate all the work you're doing in that area. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Any questions?
I'll add that we had as a part of soliciting feedback from volunteers, we did create a volunteer survey that we intend to send out shortly after this meeting, just asking volunteers how well they feel supported from the national office, how well they feel supported from the district governor. Do they know what the district governor does? Do they understand the vision of the fraternity and the importance of volunteers and helping us realize that vision? So I think the next time we get together, we'll also have a lot of good objective information from our volunteers about how they feel about volunteering and be able to use that to complement what Brian just received from his listening tour.
Right. Yeah, the listening tour was very well received in Philadelphia. I was not able to attend, but I think we had close to 20 people there at the Union League. One of our alumni brothers is a member of the Union League in Philadelphia, and he was able to get one of the rooms there, and the event was very well received. We got a lot of positive feedback from it, from the volunteers that attended. So.
Other questions, comments?
Joe, what do you feel you need from this board to make your job a little bit easier and maybe even our district governors more successful or feel more empowered?
Well, I've shared this with staff in the past, and Brian, I think you and I have had this conversation too. I think that moving forward, the fraternity, with its kind of renewed emphasis on recruiting volunteers, I think a critical component of that is the relationship that the staff has with its district governors. For example, we've got a chapter services director or chapter and volunteer services director. We've got a regional director, and we have a district governor. That's a triumvirate in my view, right? I'll do a monthly call with the chapter services director. That relationship has to work. And the chapter services director is the one we believe that really needs to drive that relationship most as the kind of the key staff person. So we kind of look at it as maybe a triumvirate, which is, a Latin word, which means three officers working in unison together, if you will. So you've got the chapter services director, you've got the district governor, you've got the regional director, all moving in the right direction toward recruiting and training volunteers. So when a chapter services director contacts the district governor on their monthly call, the first question should be, what's your pipeline look like? Let's go to your pipeline and make sure that that pipeline is being, that the volunteer candidates in that pipeline are being pushed out and are found a place to be involved in your district. That currently doesn't happen. We're not reviewing pipelines with headquarters staff. The district governor committee thinks that's a critical component moving forward, to get these pipelines kind of cleaned up and interested alumni placed as volunteers, right? The second would be, let's go to your AVC rosters. How comfortable do you feel with your AVC rosters? Do you think that they're updated and accurate? We have lots of new district governors who are finding that their AVC rosters are outdated. There are people on those rosters that have not been involved with the chapter in years. Their contact information is old, and all of those rosters need to be cleaned up. Many of those AVC rosters do not have fully involved and engaged volunteers in them. So that triumvirate, that group, the district governor, the chapter services director, the regional director, working in unison can begin to kind of move the needle in the direction of cleaning up these rosters, filling those cleaned up rosters with people in their pipeline, and continuing to recruit volunteers. And if we're going to get to 15,000 volunteers by the 125th anniversary, that triumvirate, that relationship, we believe needs to work really well.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, Joe. We really
Thanks, Joe.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Joe.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Have a
Joe.
great weekend.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
All right,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Bye.
And then finally, we have the Leadership Development Committee being represented today by Jeff Back.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
Thank you all. For those I haven't met, my name is Jeff Back. It's a pleasure to be with y'all virtually today. And I'll be speaking on behalf of the Leadership Development Committee in Jay Hurt's stead. So happy to share a little bit about what we've got going on for the past couple months and where we hope to go from here, and answer any questions, and also learn a little bit more, I think, from you all about where we can be most helpful to the organization, as the origin of our
committee is much more recent than I think many of the reports you all have heard today. I'll go ahead and share my screen quickly and just have a few slides to talk through, and really would love to make it a conversation with you all as well. All right, hopefully you all are seeing my screen now. Awesome. Well, the first thing, like I mentioned, this committee actually met for the first time in April of this year. And so we had the chance to get together down in Houston and had the chance with the folks you see on the screen to get together in a room for a couple of days and start to look at how we would address this charge that the board has given to us of defining a leadership development continuum for all members of SigEp, something that is experienced from the day they join until the day they graduate, recognizing fully that that could be from the first day of a college career all the way up to maybe a senior who may be joining for a far shorter period of time until that day they graduate, with opportunities for some of our more intimate experiences like Ruck that are connected to that continuum. But once again, the continuum being accessible to all members of the organization. See the folks that are represented on that committee and who's contributing to this work. And again, we've really just had the chance to get started in the last few months. The couple of things that I wanted to share just that have been foundational to some of the conversations that we've had are some of the challenges and opportunities that different members of the committee have really leaned into in the conversations that have happened thus far. Some of the quick notes are about the way that we talk of our leadership continuum today, recognizing that much of the programming has been developed long ago, and while experiencing updates along the way, we see some gaps in opportunities for things that matter to this generation of college students and what it means to be leaders for this generation of college students. And then you see that similarly not accessible to all, or that very limited programming reaches all of our undergraduate members. And then the other most primary one that came up in our conversations most recently was that consistent local delivery of quality programming. So recognizing how is it that we actually take the programming available if we're going to go for every single undergraduate member, and how do we actually get that out there in a consistent way? I heard some of the conversation earlier, particularly in the DEI committee conversation about how do we modularize content such that we don't have 18, 19, 20-year-olds creating DEI sessions when maybe they haven't left the state of Georgia. I heard that comment earlier. So how do we actually think about giving good content that can be implemented well on the local level? Some of the opportunities, and then the last thing I wanted to share with y'all is really where we've landed in our conversations thus far, and get some fast feedback from y'all on that. But some of the opportunities are really thinking about the Balance Man program as that distribution channel. That was a language that was used by a few members of the committee for our leadership content. Thinking about how we use the learning communities as well as a real channel for leadership development, and really just take advantage of the programming and access points that we have in the organization today to build leadership really robustly and through a common language into the organization. Now, the piece that I want to share here, and then I'll pause for reactions and questions, is how we're starting to think about what this frame may look like for a leadership continuum that looks like what the organization needs today. And the first part of it is really considering what is the order in which the focus on leadership needs to show up for students. And as we took a look at it, really it turned into 4 specific areas that if I'm going to develop as a leader, or a student is going to develop as a leader, they first need to focus on leading themselves, understanding more, and we'll go into each of these a little bit more deeply, but leading themselves, then thinking about what is the impact that their leadership, that their behaviors have on those around them when they are expected to lead by example. Thirdly, thinking about then are we equipping people to lead others, lead teams, lead people with the skills of maybe what many would consider more traditional leadership. And then lastly, how do we equip our best members to actually lead communities, lead organizations, lead larger, more complex structures and teams that they may be a part of. A couple of ways that we thought about this conversation, we're thinking about what is the promise that we can make to every single member of SigEp from the time they join until the time they graduate, that they will get this development. And in a very simple way, I'll build this out, just thinking about what the promise we can make in each of these buckets might look like. So for leading self, that every single brother is going to better know his values, passions, strengths, and opportunity for growth. Now, I'll share as well, all of this is very draft language and very open to, it's written in pencil, not in pen. But this is an illustration of the way that we were thinking about the conversation. in Lead by Example that every single brother, no matter what age, how long they've been in the chapter, that we can promise that every brother who goes through anything in the Lead by Example bucket would be able to better understand accountability and discipline and what that looks like in their action. And you can see for lead others and lead communities as well. The next piece that we talked about was what is the purpose of each of these 4 buckets? So what are some of the skills that we might actually instill in students along the way and our brothers? Specifically life skills within that lead self, you see some examples there, and these are non-exhaustive lists, certainly. So we started to work into that area and still have a lot of work to do. What are some of the tools and how do some of the programs that we have today map to these different actually structures within? So thinking about, and Jay and I had a conversation recently about Tragos Quest to Greece, a program we talked about today. Where does it fit within this? We think about it oftentimes as almost the culmination of our current leadership continuum, and so few of our members get the opportunity to have that experience. We actually see it as an incredibly deep experience within the leading self bucket. And so while this looks linear on the slide that you're seeing, we really see it as something that is a continuous cycle that members will continue to have those opportunities for more intimate experiences around each of these. And then lastly, the piece that we have not been able to build out in the short time that we've had as a committee is really what are the specific outcomes that we seek to measure and drive within each of these 4 areas. And the last comment I'll make is that we saw a distinct difference between these first 2 and 3rd and 4th areas that as we seek to build balanced men, that all of our members are going to be able to explore this idea of leading self and leading by example. And as we seek to lead others and lead communities, that's where we really look at what does it like to build balanced leaders. I know that was a lot of me talking, and I just wanted to share a little bit of what the committee has been talking about and what we had the chance to converse about in Houston, but would love to get reactions, take any questions, and talk about what the future of the committee looks like as well.
Questions? Comments?
So Jeff, I've got a question for you. It's Jelky. I like the shift from programmatic continuum to a more conceptual continuum, right? Like I think now you can slide things in like the BMP seamlessly and say, hey, the BMP can teach you all of this and that touches everyone. And then somewhere we fit Ruck into this concept and Greece and all of that stuff and anything new that may come out. Have you all thought through when you're talking about outcomes, like what's the, to me, if you're going to do outcomes, you probably want to have some kind of leadership theory basis, something to ground everything on so that it fits into the continuum and then you can plug those things in. I know Ruck has their own way of doing that and, you know, BMP used to have a different thing and I haven't been to Greece, so I don't know what that looks like. Have you guys talked about grounding this and grounding outcomes in some kind of theory or have it be more self-grown?
Yeah, Tom, thanks for the question. I think it's an important one of, is there even a philosophy or a leadership framework that could service all of these needs? I think that's the question we're at today. So we talked a little bit about the leadership challenge, right? There are the 5 practices of exemplary leadership from Ruck. And it slots incredibly well into parts of what I'm sharing with you right now. We think that really that is an exercise. And when you really think about those 5 practices, they're about leading others. And could it be included in terms of lead by example as well? I think so, when you think about model the way as a specific behavior. But when I think about, is there anything that specifically goes across all 4 of these? We haven't yet found that. Frankly, we haven't done a deep dive into researching what may be out there. But I think what we saw was opportunities to expand where we use something like the leadership challenge that currently slots into maybe that leading others bucket, seeing able the opportunity to expose more of our members to that more early on through something like lead by example. But then also there's components that aren't fully, I guess I should say, there's other important aspects of this leadership continuum that may not be captured by a single leadership theory or framework. Yeah. There.
Jeff, I had a conversation with Jay recently, and he said that the concept of enriching or enrichment was an overarching theme and what your committee has been working on. I found that fascinating because it's not a concept that I think SigEp has used previously. Could you expand on that a little bit, where we might, how that's influenced what you've done thus far, or how it might influence what you do going forward?
Yeah, and we have the man with us now himself, Jay Hurt. I know we've had some conversations about that word enrich. Jay, I know you're just getting logged on with us. We were just asked a question about essentially this idea of enriching men's lives and how that has informed the committee's work so far. Happy to turn it over to you if you want, or I can take a stab at it as well.
Jay, you should be all set if you unmute on your end.
Looks like Jay might still be getting connected. Oh, Jay, you there?
Sorry, yeah, no, am I here? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Guys, my apologies. Somehow we got an hour ahead of schedule and I was planning on 6:30 and I just got here, I thought, an hour early, and Jeff's just nailing it. So my apologies, but I'm glad to be able to.
Jay, let me say this is emblematic of what my tenure and my leadership are doing for SigEp. Short and to the point. Get her done.
Charlie might beg to differ based on the retreat. Apparently Federal Reserve board meetings take a third of the time as a national retreat for in a day, but no comment. No, I mean, we don't want to reinvent the strategic plan. That was not our intent, but in our kind of brainstorming white session, we kind of looked at the whole notion of, why, and enrichment really struck us as what, SigEp for many of us is really all about. And that doesn't mean that leadership's not a critical piece of that. It certainly is, balanced man and balanced leader both. But it's all done in the context, we thought, of enriching our lives. And if we all look back at our SigEp experience and we try to take SigEp out of our lives and think how our lives would be different without SigEp, I'd argue that to a person, people would say that SigEp is less enriching. Their lives are less enriched without SigEp, whether it's friendships, whether it's what they learned, whether it's who they do business with, et cetera. So we personally just liked the term enrichment. We're not trying to push that term necessarily, but it sort of influenced or guided our thinking in terms of making certain that when we talk about leadership programming, we're not too programmatic. We don't want to become, Jeff, as Jeff said, what did you say last night, Jeff? Leadership. A
leader factory?
A leader factory, yeah. I mean, while we want to certainly produce leaders, we don't want to be seen as a leader factory. I love that terminology from Jeff. We want to do it in a way that is in the spirit of fraternalism and do it in a way that enriches our lives. So I think that's what we were referring to, Billy, if that's helpful.
Yep.
And whether that can be used in some other way going forward, maybe, maybe not. No pride of authorship.
Can you guys explain that?
Elaborate on it.
Can you elaborate leadership factory?
Like what that means.
Well, I mean,
and why we shouldn't be producing leaders?
I don't think that's what
I know that, but when you say we don't want to be leadership factory, that's sort of what comes to my head. So I just wanted to understand.
Well, I'll give you an example. I mean, I'll give you an example. Arguably, the Ruck Leadership Institute is our premier leadership development initiative to date. I think that if you talk to people about their experience at the Ruck Leadership Institute, did they get very valuable lessons in leadership, and can that help them become better leaders or make them better leaders or choose to inspire them to become leaders? Yes, absolutely. But I think if you ask them, what was the feeling? How did it, what was the culture of the experience? It wasn't one of a factory. It was one of a fraternity, if you will. So in my sense, it's maybe, just a bit of a terminology thing, but we don't want to become so mechanized that we lose sight of the interpersonal relationships that we're the laboratory, if you will, through which we're all learning and leading. So it certainly doesn't mean that we don't have leadership programs that we encourage and support our undergraduates in going through. whether those are our own programs or whether those are programs we partner with others to produce. We just don't want to become so mechanized that we lose sight of the fraternal side of things. I think that's what we mean by not wanting to be a leadership faculty.
Makes sense.
Yeah, maybe more art and less science.
Correct.
Actually, I think the reason that when Jay and I were just talking about it, the reason I thought of it was actually the idea of like what happened when Henry Ford started opening his factories, right? He had to hire over 50,000 people to fill 12,000 spots, had to triple wages in order for people to actually work in the factory. And I think it's more of the how do we actually produce the cars? How do we produce the leaders? Not about the idea of producing leaders itself. How do we take advantage of the relationships in that sandbox, that laboratory environment that we have for multiple years as a student in college to build the relationships and build the safety with the members in your chapter in order to get uncomfortable and explore these ideas of leadership? Well,
the work of this committee is going to be essential because not only what you come up with, but how we communicate it, how we present it, how it's rolled out is going to become an important part of any campaign that we might choose to participate in going forward. And so I think you and your committee understand the import there. And so I appreciate very much your willingness to go there. This is what we do. This is where the rubber meets the road, if you will, for our undergraduates. And so on behalf of 12,000, 13,000 undergraduates, I thank you.
We did have a couple of questions. People seem really fascinated here. There's a couple of comments around, it seems to really align with Barry Posner's new book, Everyday People, Extraordinary Leadership. And so lots of head nods there. So a few people wrote that in. And then another wrote in, have you thought about how this ties to the ritual? Or any comments there?
Well, I think Barry called Jeff when he was thinking about the idea of his next book, his latest book. And I think so, maybe there's some connection there. I'm not certain. I don't want to get too much. Well, the short answer is no. I don't know that we thought about how the ritual incorporates into this. I know we did talk about the cardinal principles in the sense of, kind of leading by example being virtue, if you want to, see it in that way, and that leading others can be diligence, and that leading communities can be brotherly love in the context of Wheeler's, why is it brotherly love, not brotherhood? It's looking outward, not looking inward. And so I do think that from the lead by example, lead others, lead communities, there's perhaps a nice tie into our cardinal principles in that regard, which obviously relates to the ritual, but how the ritual incorporates into this, I'm not certain that we've gotten to that. I'd love to have an opportunity for the ritual committee to review this further and provide us input on that, because we haven't gotten there yet.
Well, I see it as an opportunity, Jay, to at everything that we do with our leadership programming, if there's an opportunity and a way to tie it back to part of or some aspect, either specifically or overarching part of our ritual, I think that's a good teaching technique. It's a reminder of how everything we do either emanates from or reinforces the fraternity's ritual.
Honestly, Jay, I think you could probably put all three of the cardinal principles in each bucket. You get virtue, diligence, and brotherly love, and all four, I think, which is
yeah. Well, that's what I like about the framework is I think it gives us the ability to hang a lot of stuff on this as it relates to leadership. And I go back to the original strategic, or not the original, but perhaps the original strategic plan, where there was a Jeff Prouty one-page flight plan, that was referred to, which was a single page that spoke to the entire strategic plan. And I think as it relates to leadership, that this framework perhaps gives us the ability to do that as we continue to refine it.
Jay, I wanted to just offer one opportunity to explore the literature in a text called Exploring Leadership for college students who want to make a difference. It very much aligns with the four buckets that you all have outlined. So that just may be some literature for the committee to explore and perhaps provide a theoretical framework for the ongoing effort.
I'd love to see it. I assume this is Heather. Can you send that, Heather, to?
It was Regina and it's on Amazon.com.
I'm sorry.
But
We'll send you a link.
We'll send you a link.
My apologies.
That's okay.
And Jay, you haven't met Regina yet, but she is the Vice President for Student Affairs at Mississippi State University. And she's our newest external member of our board. So we're lucky to have her. She's basically in this business. So I'm glad you two are meeting and
nice to meet you, Jay.
Well, welcome. Nice to meet you as well. I look forward to meeting in person sometime soon.
Regina, is that Susan? Is that Susan's book? Is that Susan's book?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that'll work.
The other thing that was mentioned is the Posner's newest book, and Jeff, I don't know if you alluded to this about the leadership challenge, kind of perhaps a different way of approaching the leadership challenge. Did you hit that before I got? Okay, got it.
The other thing with that, I forgot the title of it, but Susan Komoviz, which is like a student life goddess, I don't know what you want to put it, guru. It comes with a facilitator's guide, if I'm not mistaken. So you can get that to all of the advisors.
Well, Jeff does this professionally, but I sell dirt for a living. So any information that's, resources you can send me, I'd be happy to see it because clearly I need help.
That's good stuff.
Other questions? And some nice dirt it is.
Yes, I sell dirt.
Expensive dirt.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, guys. Apologize for my
Appreciate
delay
it.
in being here.
No worries.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Well done.
Going forward, always be early for a Madelon meeting. That's the lesson.
Somebody please write that down. That is gonna come back to bite me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye, Jay.
Okay, so that leaves you to your closing remarks, Victor.
So I've got about 45 minutes of. I mean, I think, from beginning to end, I hope that we'll remember, again, we can't do it all. But I think you see there's a lot of exciting work going on. Every time I hear about some of these different pieces, it makes me excited about the fraternity. It makes me excited again about the future. But again, as we talked about, this morning, fundraising for it. And where do we go? And so I think all that kind of pulls together. So I think we're at a point, and I think all of you've done this, but I've dealt with committees with other organizations, and I will say that we've got some really strong committee chairs and some folks who are really committed. So those are really my closing remarks. Does anybody have any comments, thoughts, concerns, issues? Anything come up?
You're doing a great job.
Really?
I gotta tell you, like when we started, when we brought back committees a few years ago, like it was a lot of work. And you're doing a great job.
Well, I have to say, an amazing amount of work is being done, but a lot of help from Brian and Heather, and particularly Chad, who's, my liaison has been working. So, and I think you have people who are enthusiastic and want to do this. I've seen when you get committee chairs, and it's just like, it's like pulling teeth, and it's like quite the opposite. And I think people, which tells me a lot about what we do as we go into fundraising, because people are really committed.
Yeah,
Whether they'll write a check or not, I don't know, but they're folks who really want to take part and see the fraternity get better. So that's all I got. I will turn it back over to Grand President Madelon.
All right, well, this is the end of our public session. We again just want to thank everybody for taking time out of your day to join us today. Just a little snapshot of what we're going to be doing for the rest of our time in St. Louis. This evening, we're going to be hearing from our student directors who are going to be reporting out on some work that they've been doing with our undergraduate leadership across the country. We're also going to be talking about some succession planning for future boards. And then we'll adjourn, and tomorrow will be basically a budget day. We'll spend our day tomorrow wrestling with the realities of the world that we're living in today in SigEp, and fashion a budget where we wrap resources around the things that we think are going to be the most important going forward that emanate from our strategic plan. It will prove to be a difficult day because we have champagne taste and Budweiser budget. So, it's always a question in this case about what we don't do, because of course we want to do it all. And as Victor said, we can't. So tomorrow we're going to build a budget that's going to take us through 2023 and into the future. And so we will be posting the results from that in the near future as well. So thank you. If there are any questions that any of you have, you can direct those to Heather or Brian or myself, and we'd be happy to get you any information that you might need, or Victor for that matter. And we thank all of our committee chairs and our committee members for the hard work that they've done. The reports today were terrific. And we look forward to engaging with you in the near future. I guess the next opportunity that our board will have to engage everybody will be at the end of the pardon. So we'll meet again in December, if not yet November, December. So that'll be the next time that we get together as a board. So thank you again, and have a terrific weekend. Am I missing anything?
We are adding a budget call, similar to what we do with the stakeholder call that we do twice a year. So in July, I think Heather will be sharing that in our follow-up. So
July
please,
13th at 8 p.m. Eastern.
July 13 at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you're able to join us, please do. We'll be getting a communication out, reminding everyone of that opportunity to join me and Grand Treasurer McVeigh to walk through the financial plans for the organization.
And I think this is a huge add, and thank you for bringing that up. I often say to our board, the most important thing we do and the most significant responsibility we have as board members is the budgeting process, deciding where limited resources go. No one can do it but us, and staff executes a plan that emanates from where the resources are. And so it's so important that our volunteers, who are really the lifeblood of Sigma Phi Epsilon, understand where our money is, where we're spending our money, and just as importantly, why the board chose to spend it on X instead of on Y, or why we can spend it on X instead of Y. That's critical, because we all have to be, what did our citation winner say at Conclave? I try to always make sure that my mouth and my feet and my pocketbook are headed in the same direction. And so in SigEp land, that in order for us to be successful, we all have to be rowing and moving all of our resources in the same direction. So that call will be really helpful, I think, for our volunteers and our stakeholders to understand why we've done what we've done with resources. So thank you for reminding me of that. That's all I have here, in the spirit of being early, since that's always what I like to be. We can adjourn the public meeting.